Resisting the technological enslavement system. This is the Live Free or Die radio show with your host, Lee Rogers.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the broadcast. Today is Tuesday, April 26th, 2011, and we will be here with you for the next 3 hours, commercial-free. And, of course, you can check out my website at roguegovernment.com for all the latest news and information, what's happening with the New World Order. But tonight, as always, every month, we have our guest on. And I'm sure if you've been listening to this show for the past several months, several years, you're familiar with his work. His name is Josh Reeves. You can check out his website at theglobalreality.com, and you can check out his documentaries, his radio show, all of his work up there on that website. So without further ado, Josh, welcome to the show.
Hey, Lee, thanks for having me on again, man. I appreciate you having me on every month and really always enjoy the stuff that we're able to get into. And it's 3 hours, even commercial free is never enough time. So I think it'll be that case again tonight.
Yeah, that's what's so crazy about everything that's going on. And I know the last show that we did, I had a lot of fun doing it. And man, I mean, we could have gone 6 hours on that show. There's just so much information and so many things to get into. It's really mind-boggling. But I guess what I like to do just to start off the show is, of course, you've been working feverishly on your upcoming film, The Secret Right, Volume 2, which gets into a lot of the stuff that I talk about on my show, the Council for National Policy, the religious priest class, and all these are stooges in the so-called patriot media or the patriot movement. How's the film coming along? And can you tell the audience where you're at with it? From what I understand, you're pretty close to finishing it.
Yeah, we're getting pretty down to the wire on the thing, and I think in a couple of weeks, I'm scheduled to have tentatively have at least a sneak preview of some stuff going down on May the 5th. That should be very interesting. So I look forward to having out there where everybody can see that at that time. And yeah, we're also probably about, I don't know, a couple weeks out, 2 or 3, 4 weeks out. I'm going to think to having it completely done. I'm going to have like a preview online for select people of my listening audience, and those people are going to get a chance to kind of rate the film, engage the film, and also to point out things maybe that I missed that maybe they think could be in there that I could maybe work into the film. And so, yeah, I'll take a couple of weeks after that, and then it'll be done. So we're looking at probably end of May for the full-blown release. So, yeah, it's getting exciting, and so much stuff. It's really not to put what to put in the film anymore. It's what not to put in it, because there's just so much information. I know you've come across that as well, Lee.
Yeah, well, part of the problem is that these characters in the Patriot movement, or the bowel movement, as I like to call it, these characters, they keep giving us more material. So it's getting increasingly difficult to try to figure out what to put in these films and how to present it to the audience. But just to give the audience a bit more information on what's going to be in the film, what are some of the major topics you're going to be covering the film? There might be some people out there who haven't heard of the show before, so I just wanted to give them a little bit more of an inkling as to some of the major topics you're going to be getting into in this new film that you're coming out with.
Well, in Volume 1 of The Secret Right, that came out in 2009, I really tried to make that film in a way where, with this information, Lee, especially at the time when we didn't have as much information as we do now, it was sort of one of those things where it would have been very easy to jump to conclusions. I tried not to ever jump to too many conclusions about this stuff, and all of the subsequent beliefs that you and I have come across and now hold about the group, the Council for National Policy, and the Jesuit Order, and the John Birch Society, all these interlocking groups that are intimately tied in with the Patriot movement and the Truth movement. We always didn't want to seem too alarmist, but my goodness, now with the amount of information that's come out, it's just overwhelming. So in Volume 1, I was really trying to go for the idea of getting people to just sort of understand that the group is there, see some of the things they've been involved in, and maybe do some of their own digging. And I think that in the 2 years now, since that film was released in April of 2009, we've seen that. We've seen an exponentiation of people that now know about the Council for National Policy. They're now looking into this more and more, and I think that it has achieved that. So in Volume 2, what I'm doing is I'm sort of going back and showing some of the deeper elements that the group has been connected to. It's going to be less about per se just the Council for National Policy, but definitely it's going to be about people who have worked in tandem with members of the group. The first part of the film is going to be about, we're going to touch a little bit on the Jesuit order, get into that, have some stuff that relates a little bit. We're not going to get a whole lot into the John Birch Society. I think that my film is going to be the perfect, we were talking about this earlier, I think it's going to be the perfect sort of setting the table perfectly for your new film, Phony Patriots, is going to be coming out this year. I think it sets the table perfectly for that between Volume 1 and Volume 2, because your film's really going to be, it's going to have it all. Your film's going to be like a greatest hits collection of everything that you know that you can put in there. Where my films, I've taken a different approach. Instead of trying to put everything in there that we know, I sort of tried to leave the door open so that people can look further deeper into it. So we're going to have stuff about the Jesuit order, the Jesuit involvement with the American Civil War, how those same constituents that are tied in today's people, like the Tea Party and the Heritage Foundation and the rest of these different groups and secret societies, are doing the same thing that they did in the time of Lincoln. They are conspiring to create civil unrest to further the agenda of the world order. And so the first part of the film will get into that. And the second part of the film is going to get into Johnny Gosch, Jeff Gannon, how that relates to the CMP. And it definitely relates. I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to give too much away here, but it's just dead to rights. The whole thing with Johnny Gosch and the white sex slave rings and how that's been connected to right wingers. So we'll get into that. And then the last part of the film is going to be basically going through and telling you why you need to be concerned about certain people's connections to a lot of these people. Like, it's going to tell you, why you should be concerned with Alex Jones and his connections and the people he has connections to. And it's, I mean, my goodness, it's mind blowing the connections that this guy has. And also when you look at the former, not former, but the Saudi arms dealer, Adnan Khashoggi, you've got his connections. You've got all the rest of stuff. So the last part of the film is really going to get into naming names, naming who's connected. And as I've said, if I found so much as you had any sort of connection to any of these guys in any significant way, and I don't care if you got 10 listeners on your radio show and 10 hits on your website, you're getting named. That's just the way it is. So the last part of the film is going to be pretty no holds barred. It's pretty going to open up and really just take the gloves off and say, look, these are the people that are concerned with it. And in the end, I'm going to really wrap it up in a way that is basically going to show people once and for all why the group is important, why it's important to talk about it, why it's important that if people are associating with these types, they start to migrate themselves away and get away from these phony movements and become individuals again. So, I'm really just trying to further the knowledge base and the amount of information that people have to open the dialogue up about talking about these things. I think with the C-Right Volume 1, it opened the dialogue. With Volume 2, we're going to do that. With your new film that's coming out is going to do that even more and expound on it. But what really I really wanted to do was just to be able to have people to have discs in their hand and things where they could say, okay, it's hard because it's very hard to give somebody a quick capsule review of what the Council for National Policy is and the Jesuit order on this stuff and make them understand why it's important. Because there's so much to it. As you said, Lee, there's so much information. They keep giving us so much that it's very difficult to sort of dumb it down and just sort of give people a quick capsule understanding of this stuff. So I think that with my two films and your film, I think people are now going to have the opportunity to have the ammunition in their hands so they can say, look, you remember the stuff I was telling you about Alex Jones and the Council for National Policy and the Jesuits and all this stuff? Just watch these films and then go do your own research and look more into this. And you're going to find stuff. I mean, Lee, we continually find out new stuff every day on this topic. There aren't really very many topics that we can discuss where we can say that every day there's new stuff coming out about it, is there?
No. Well, here's the thing. I mean, this is a very complicated subject, primarily because there are so many different subgroups and so many different sub-organizations that are connected to the Council for National Policy, the John Birch Society, the Tea Party movement. It's really very difficult to dive into everything 100% and know everything there is to know about these groups. Because once you look at the Council for National Policy, you see groups like, the Conservative Caucus, you see groups like the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, the Reason Foundation. You look into the Koch brothers, you see how their father, Fred Koch, was tied in with the John Birch Society. It just goes on and on. The connections are just amazing when you start digging into everything. And then when you find out what the Heritage Foundation is all about, when you find out what the Council for National Policy is about, and you see how they're tied into all this globalist garbage, it becomes very obvious what's happening here. But you're 100% correct, Josh. These are very complicated subjects. There's a lot of information to research. So what I think we'll be able to do with these films, and I hope this is the case, but I really hope that we'll be able to inject some new issues into the realm and scope of these phony movements and get people to question these new boxes that they've basically fallen into.
Well, that's exactly what they are. They are boxes that people have fallen into, because you have to understand. I mean, that was one of the biggest red flags for me, Lee. Even before I'd found out about the Council for National Policy, there were just little things I started noticing, being involved in the truth movement and stuff. I mean, I just would notice things that, like, well, that exact thing you just named. It seemed to me that I started to see all the trappings of things that I'd seen before that happen in cliques and groups and, cultish, cult of personality mentality type of things, and I started to see those same things reflected in that, and I kind of, put it by the wayside, but it started nagging more and more at me. And then I started realizing, wait a minute, this information is so powerful, all of it, whether you're talking about the CMP or whether you're talking about the Illuminati or whatever, it's all interconnected. It's all a part of the same subject. And there's just so much of it, that, to me, it's very difficult to try and make people understand why they need to be looking at this. And so I just sort of started seeing all of these different similarities and things, and I went, oh my goodness, this is supposed to be about information, enlightening people, separating yourself from the group, from the herd, from the sheeple mentality. And that's what I thought this was. But then I started finding out, wait, this isn't that. This is the same old clique mentality. You think like us, or you're ostracized, you have to have the same beliefs. You have to believe that thermite brought down the Twin Towers. If you believe any other possible theory, you're a spook or a fed or anything else. It just wasn't open thinking to me. It wasn't an open discussion. It was very dogmatic in its approach. And then I started seeing people, I don't know, these sort of half-assed survival nut types. And I started going, well, I didn't get into this to be like, some survival nut crazy. Let's get water and storable foods. All those things are important, but I don't know. And when I started seeing that, I was like, something's wrong here. Something's up with this. And
people trying to make money. That's the thing. Got a bunch of people who just want to try to make money instead of trying to find the truth. That's really what a lot of these people are in this for. They're not in for truth.
But the problem is, I don't have a problem with anybody making money, Lee. But the problem I have is that all the products that they're making money off of are based off of this fear economy.
Exactly. Well, that's the problem.
I mean, if it was, I don't have a problem with it. If somebody's making money and they're selling legitimate products that people want and they're good for people and people are willing to pay that for, fine. But the problem is that all the products that revolve around this type of research and work and everything else revolve around the idea that if you're not using fear on your radio show and using it to pump things, then you're not selling products, then you're not, providing the powers that be with the money they need. So that's the problem with this stuff, Lee, is that it's, I don't think any of us have a problem with people making money, but the fact of the matter is they are giving people false information so that they can make money. That's a problem. Sure.
Well, how about Steve Quayle? He's a perfect example. That jackass keeps coming out with these phony alerts that the Chinese are going to invade this country. I mean, what the hell is that? I mean, the guy's putting out all of this bogus information just so he can sell products and get people to visit his website or whatever else he's trying to do. And he's not the only one. There's other people out there that continue to do this type of thing. And it's ridiculous that people keep following these clowns. I mean, what's wrong with people, honestly?
That's the whole thing. Is then what is so dangerous about this, Lee? And this is why it's important to talk about it. There may be some people out there listening that aren't familiar with my work or your work, and they don't understand why it's important for us to be talking about this stuff. And why is it important to expose what you just said about what Steve Quayle's doing? Well, it's the classic boy that cried wolf scenario. And I think that's what these guys, I think that's what they're into the op is, Lee. You and I have talked about, and you've talked about in your show as well as I have, that what you find, especially in the Council for National Policy, and I'm not necessarily saying Steve Quayle's in the Council for National Policy or anything. What I'm saying is, specifically in that group, what you find the fact that they assign these different people to different roles in different areas of the agenda. And it seems to me that people like Steve Quayle and Alex Jones and many others have now taken on the role of essentially taking information. I mean, everybody knows about Chinese supremacy, and everybody knows about what's going on, especially right now with the new monetary system, this emergency financial meeting the United States is having in May with China. What they're doing with their treasury bonds. They're talking about slashing and hacking these things. You've got the IMF fear-mongering the end of America. So, all these things are relevant world topics. But when you take a relevant world topic and you go on your radio show every day and say, buy this, buy that, buy this, buy that, Chinese troops are going to be here Red Dawn style by tomorrow, buy this, buy that. When it doesn't happen, eventually people get to the point and they go, oh, well, that's just, it's just more BS or more scaremonger. That's Steve Quayle again. And then I'm just afraid that something is going to happen one day. And there are going to be people like us that are going to be, yelling and screaming and saying, red alert, whatever. And people are just going to go, oh, it's just probably those truther tards again. They're never right about anything. And it's going to be a real threat. And a lot of people are going to get hurt or killed. That is what, to me, Lee, that is the number one reason why we have to expose all these clowns that we've been talking about and continue to talk about regarding the CMP and the phony patriots.
Well, exactly. You're 100% correct. And it really upsets me because when you have people that are putting out blatantly false information just to draw attention to themselves and to make everybody look stupid, it does an extreme disservice to people who are trying to put out truthful information. And look, I'm not saying that I'm 100% correct all the time.
Not me either.
But neither myself nor you are getting on air and making up all these crazy things about Chinese troops invading the country so that people will visit our websites or listen to our radio shows. It's completely ridiculous, and it makes all of us look stupid. So we have to call these people out for the fearmonger liars that they are. Otherwise, we look even worse. And people don't seem to understand that, and they stick with these stupid talking points about how anybody who talks about these things, well, they're dividing some non-existent movement. Now, I'm really tired of this type of nonsense. We have to understand, look, here's the problem with this whole patriot thing. Let's just look at this in a microcosm, for an example. You take a look at their points of view on the Bilderberg group, okay? They say, oh, big, powerful group, they meet in secret, this is terrible. Yet, when it comes to the Council for National Policy, well, they meet in secret 3 times a year, or actually, in many ways, more secretive than Bilderberg, because at least Bilderberg, when they met in Virginia, they released the people who attended the meeting.
Yeah. We get nothing on CMP meetings at all.
There's nothing for the CMP. We don't know who's a member and who's not. They don't release any of their membership list. Okay? The only membership lists we have been the result of people finding information here and there and some sparse media reports, but they have never officially released any membership list. So I think that in a microcosm also shows the hypocrisy that we're dealing with here. And it's on so many levels, it would take us hours to just go over all of them.
Well, and I think also, Lee, that as you were talking about earlier with the whole selling of products and using fear to do that, that's the big thing is that I don't even have a problem. I want to make that crystal clear because sometimes people get their signals crossed on me when it comes to that. I don't even have a problem with people wanting to be prepared or stocking up on ammo and weapons or having a bunker or being prepared or anything. I don't think any of those things are bad at all. I think those things are great. I think if you can afford to do that and you want to prepare yourself and you can prepare yourself and your family, then do that. Always good to be prepared in any circumstances. But the fact of the matter is, why can't you just have a bunch of products and have these things and advertise them? If I was ever going to do that, and I never will, hopefully, and as long as my listeners continue to say that that's what they want, is they want me to do it the way I do it, and they have. So, but if I ever was in that position, if I was having to sell all that stuff, I'd just say, look, it's all here. Buy it if you want to. You can be prepared. You can do this and that. But, don't think that you need to buy this because of this information that we're talking about. Take this information, make decisions that are going to keep you and your family safe if you feel you need to. But, don't do it out of fear. Do it because it's the right thing to do. Do it because it's better to be prepared just in case. But again, it's the intent. And that's one of the things I've zeroed in on quite a bit lately and been talking about on my show is the intent in which things are done. And that's how you get the result. And I think that when people are using the intent of fear and scaremongering to sell products, the end result of that is going to be widespread fear and chaos. And I think that's exactly what these guys doing. That's their credo, ordo ab chao. We know that, and this pervades in all of the societies, all of the ruling classes. But it's just this constant perpetuation of chaos and order and destruction and warfare. And you would be a damn fool to say that the CMP isn't one of the biggest players in that agenda.
Well, certainly they play a major role, just like any of these are powerful think tanks and organizations. But, just one example to illustrate your point. You take a look at what Alex Jones was doing at the height of all this Japanese nuclear radiation fear-mongering. And he was selling potassium iodide pills, and it was all sorts of price gouging involved. He was selling them for twice the amount that you could get them from other places. And that right there, I think, says all we need to say about what is going on. Look, I mean, fine. If you want to sell the potassium iodide pills, great, fine. Okay, sure, people might want them. But don't jack up the price twice as high as you normally sell them just because there's a quote-unquote shortage. That in of itself shows that he's just trying to make a quick buck off of people's fear. And that, to me, is just reprehensible.
Yeah, it's fear capitalism. It's the fear... it's a fear economy. I mean, Alex Jones has created an entire his own little economy around fear, and then he's subsequently got all these idiots, well-doing idiots, to convince themselves that somehow that's justifiable. Because it's the same thing, he confuses the fact that a lot of the information he talks about is relevant and true, and then mixes that up and confuses that with this capitalistic mentality of capitalizing on people after you've already traumatized them into giving you all of your money. It's the classic info-evangelist. It's exactly what the guy is. He's an info-evangelist. He's one of these TV televangelists, but he's an info-evangelist, and so he gives people information, and then that's his sermon. I've heard the guy on his show I've heard him ask people to donate before and say, support our ministry, folks. I'm like, why is he calling it a ministry? And then you think about it and you go, oh, well, that's exactly how he sees it, because that's what it is. He's no different than a TV evangelist, a TV preacher, or anything else. And, this is still the United States of America, and you can still do that. So he is. And, but the fact of the matter is, when you look into it, it's interesting because you sort of see the same tentacles and the same backers and the people that back a lot of these TV evangelist preachers. I mean, look how many of them there are in the CMP. You've got
there's a ton.
there's tons of them, and of course if you really break down and look at their all individual ministries, you'll notice that any one of them, Rod Parsley or Pastor Hagee or any of these guys, they all sort of have their ministries, and they're machines. They're set up and designed to rake in money and perpetuate themselves. And I think that the InfoWars empire has grown in that same way that any of these TV evangelist empires have grown.
Yeah, it's no different than what Pat Robertson does. Only it's on a different level. It's just a different a way to go about trying to rake in cash and to play off on people's fears. Because, I mean, how many times do you see people like Jerry Falwell or Pat Robertson talk about the end of the world? I mean, Jerry Falwell was talking about the end of the world back in the 1980s. Same thing with Pat Robertson saying that, oh, well, God's controlling hurricanes and all this crazy stuff. I mean, these people are just frauds. They're liars. They're frauds. They're only putting out this information and this hysteria to get people to donate money to their causes and donate money to their phony ministries, and it's just a big joke, and people just buy into it because they believe they're men of God. It's a very dangerous situation that we have here with these phony preachers, and you're right, Jones kind of plays in that whole game, that whole mindset. But Josh, I want to switch gears.
I just want to say something before you switch gears, though.
Sure.
And also, don't forget that you made the reference to Alex Jones and Pat Robertson there. So don't forget also that long before there was an Alex Jones, you had Pat Robertson, and if you listen to some of his older broadcasts from the 80s and stuff, he was the first guy, even before Alex Jones, that was, New World Order, every other word was coming out of his mouth. Pat Robertson even wrote a book called The New World Order, and he talked about, basically all of the tenets that are the talking points of today of the mainstream truth movement, patriot movement, and the whole conspiracy field. So long before, it wouldn't be a surprise that he had taken that model and built it, because long before that, and that's exactly what Pat Robertson was doing. And of course, Pat Robertson's father before him was a Freemason. Pat Robertson being a Freemason as well. Freemasons, Jesuits. I mean, there's a lot of evidence that there was an internal war going on between Freemasons and Jesuits long ago. But it seems now that in our day and age that's long since passed, and these guys are all just in bed together.
That's the way I see it. I don't think there's any question about it, that all of these different organizations are certainly working together for the establishment of a global government. And, regardless of what you believe, if you believe that, well, one secret society infiltrated another secret society, or one religious order infiltrated another religious order, there's many different theories on it. And I don't think we'll ever know 100% what actually happened behind the scenes. But what I do know, and I'm sure you'll agree, Josh, is that all these organizations are working towards the same goal, and that's, of course, global government. I don't think there's any question about that. But I did want to switch gears because I'm sure you've heard about this, and it's amazing because I think both of us, we accurately predicted that this was going to happen, and I firmly believe this is going to be true. But, of course, Ron Paul announced that he's forming his presidential campaign exploratory committee. Looks like
big surprise.
Yeah, big surprise. And he's been getting a lot of media attention. I mean, he was on the front page of the Drudge Report. Oh, Ron Paul's running for president. And so I firmly believe at this point in time, and it looks very obvious, at least as far as I'm concerned, that Ron Paul is going to play a major role in the 2012 staged political campaign, the staged elections. I don't know exactly what role he's going to play. I mean, you got Michelle Bachmann running around. Of course, all of a sudden, she's gotten a lot of money into her coffers.
Oh, yeah.
Which is very interesting. And, of course, she's attended Council for National Policy meetings. Ron Paul is friends with a lot of people who have been tied in the Council for National Policy, like Mr. Grover Norquist, the Vladimir Lenin of the anti-tax movement. I saw an article. And that's actually true. It's
actually true.
It's amazing because this guy, Grover Norquist, this clown actually got his ideologies from Vladimir Lenin, and he applied it to the anti-tax movement, all this conservative garbage. So these people are such frauds, man. Plus, also, Lou Larryman's coming out of the woodworks. I guess he's going to be on Larry Kudlow tomorrow. So I haven't seen that guy on TV in ages.
My God. I just talked about that on my show last night. Just to interrupt you real quick. I just talked about that last night. It seemed to me that we'd seen kind of a down period from these guys. We hadn't seen them a lot. And I just knew like clockwork, as soon as we started getting back into the election cycle again, you'd start seeing these CMP clowns all over TV and everything. And of course, you have already Grover Norquist, as you mentioned. There he is.
Yeah, it's amazing. But anyway, Josh, I want to get your take on all this stuff. I mean, all these points I just mentioned. Where do you see this whole Ron Paul campaign going? Because we know the 2008 Ron Paul campaign was designed to fail. I started noticing all sorts of problems with the New Hampshire primary, the Iowa caucuses, how there were no signs. There's a real lack of campaign materials from the campaign itself. He had $4 million friggin' dollars left over when his campaign was all said and done. And he used that to fund the Campaign for Liberty. I mean, really, he screwed a lot of people that donated money to his campaign and did not use all that money up front to try to win the first couple of states. So it was clear that his campaign was run to fail. So I guess I'm curious how many people are going to buy into this second go-around with the Ron Paul campaign. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people are. But, no. Josh, I'd like to give you as much time as you need to give your full spiel on this whole fiasco that's currently transpiring.
Well, you called it. I mean, like you said, we saw this coming a long time ago. I started seeing immediately after the elections in 2008, and I mean within weeks, I started seeing websites that had stickers and T-shirts for sale that said Paul Palin 2012. And people were already talking about a Ron Paul, Sarah Palin ticket in 2012. And oh, my God, they might actually do this, And of course, we since then we've seen everything they've done with Sarah Palin. They're moving her into other operations, and so now that they're moving her into other operations, you're starting to see them now bringing out Michelle Bachmann more and more. And then, of course, they have another woman in there to play that card. When I went to a Freedom 21 conference in 2008, where I shot footage of Phyllis Schlafly, Larry Pratt, that was in Secret Right Volume 1. We were in the lobby, and Phyllis Schlafly was in the lobby with her handler, and we were sort of, we were just in the bar, so we were sort of snooping and lower, kind of listening to what they were talking about, and trying to pick up on little things. And I did hear Phyllis Schlafly say on the telephone, Michelle is going to be at the meeting in September. And at the time, I didn't really know what that meant. And later on, we would come to find out that the Council for National Policy had their meeting in Chicago in September, the week of the Democratic National Convention that was going on in Colorado. So I immediately said, "Oh, so that's what the Michelle Bachmann is. What is who she Phyllis Schlafly was talking about? Michelle's going to be at the meeting in September. So I think probably as far back as even then they were starting to they were really starting to formulate the idea of that bringing Michelle Bachmann in there. But I think before it's over with, you may see a Michelle Bachmann Ron Paul ticket. I think that you may see that with Ron Paul as vice president and Alex Jones, and everybody else will just justify it and say, "Oh, fine, you know, who cares if he's in there with her as long as he gets in there." Blah 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 blah. Probably one of the best gigs you could ever get, the way I see it is getting to run for president. Not even trying to run to win, but just running, because you get to go be out there and you get to go travel and you get to have, free meals and the best meals and try to stay in the best hotels and go around and go from stop to stop. And you get to have, mini Nuremberg rallies where everybody's chanting your name and holding up signs. I mean, it's very exhilarating. I mean, this is like a rock star tour for Ron Paul. I mean, that's what he had the first go around. He was out there, not trying to win. He comes out with his own running an educational campaign because the guy was having fun, man. He was getting out there. They have to have some horses in the race to make it look like it's not a total monarchy when it is. So they have these guys go out. It's good for them. They play the part. They go out. They get their campaign cash. They get a nice little vacation. They get a big chunk of cash at the end of it, and everybody goes on about their business. And I think that's the same thing we got going on here. I'm worried more not about because I used to think for the longest time we'd probably see some truther or patriot or somebody like that in Alex Jones InfoWars shirt, taking a pop shot at Obama, maybe trying to assassinate him, or maybe successfully doing it. And I don't know. But now and more, I think it's probably shifting over towards these left-wing extremists. I mean, they very well could do something where some extremist, tries to assassinate Ron Paul or something. I think that there's a major, I feel the same way you did. You kind of stopped short of saying what I'm about to say, but I don't know, Lee. Like you said, I can't help but feel that during this election cycle, there was some sort of major psychological operation, possibly a psyop that could trigger civil unrest, possibly civil war, violent armed conflict. I don't know, but I think there is some sort of psychological operation coming around the corner concerning Ron Paul.
Well, something major is going to happen with the electoral cycle and his role in it. We don't know exactly what it's going to be. But, I mean, you just take a look at the amount of media coverage this guy has gotten. It's absolutely insane. This guy is on all sorts of cable TV shows talking about the Federal Reserve. They even they put him in the position of being the head of that committee that oversees the Federal Reserve. Now, I mean, why would they do that? Honestly, if Ron Paul was really against the system and all this stuff, why would they put him as the main guy overseeing the Federal Reserve? I think there's something happening where, of course, there's all sorts of talk that they're going to be shifting to a new currency anyway. You see what's happening with gold, silver, and the dollar and everything that's happening. I mean, the economy is really hurting bad by design. So they might be moving towards that phase as well. But, man, I mean, there's just so much media attention being paid to Ron Paul because you remember back in 2007, 2008, there was almost no media coverage of him. There was practically nothing, but now this go around, it seems like the media is being very favorable to him, very fair to him, along with, of course, Jones, all these other people. And so it seems as if this go around, they're going to be giving him a lot of credibility. And of course, he won our straw poll recently, and it just seems different this go around. So I do believe that something major is going to happen. So I'm definitely with you there.
Well, I mean, maybe there. Let's talk about it. I mean, let's just throw out possibilities here. Let's. I mean, what are the possibilities? What could they be planning? Are they planning to do a one-term run with Obama? And are they going to go ahead and just fully merge the sort of Tea Party end of things with the sort of Alex Jones, truther, Ron Paul end of it? It very well could be. Maybe that's what this move of moving Glenn Beck into higher operations at Fox. With everybody believing that he got some sort of a demotion. Oh, please.
No, he was promoted. Yeah, he was absolutely promoted.
He's in charge of, he's going to be in charge of, what programming goes on there and actually creating. I think that could very well be a bigger part of this, especially, what you've talked about and I've talked about in the past several months with Alex Jones and Fountain, he's going to be at Alex Jones level by this time next year. Glenn Beck is going to be where I'm at. Blah, 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 all this stuff. You started seeing it sort of merging together. And to me, I think that's what they may. That's the card they might play here. It's a very real possibility. I'm not going to say it's a 100% fact, but it's a distinct possibility that this go round during this election cycle, we may see that. We may see them really form what I called long ago the new right, which is to me the new right, because it is the amalgamation of the all these splinter groups, the Tea Parties, the Tea Party Express, the Truth Movement, the Patriot Movement, the Ron Paul supporters, libertarians, all this made into one gigantic amalgamation party that is the new party that takes over where the Republicans left off. It's not really the Republicans anymore. It's not really the libertarians anymore. It's not really the Tea Party anymore. It's not really the Truth Movement anymore. It's one big conglomeration, and everybody, claims they're into freedom and liberty and all this stuff, but really it's just the people that are working on the continuation of the capitalist system.
Yeah, well,
that's who they are.
Yeah, it seems as if almost every 15 to 20 years we see this. We saw it with Barry Goldwater back in the early 60s, and then after that all went away, then in the early 1980s, late 70s, we saw it with Ronald Reagan. And then around 1994, we saw it with the Republicans and the contract with America and all this our nonsense. And you saw Dick Armey, Newt Gingrich, and all these characters that were involved with that. And now in our 15 years later, we got the Tea Party, and it's basically the same damn thing. Nothing's changed. The same characters involved over and over and over again. I mean, one of Barry Goldwater's relatives, I forget exactly who, was supporting Ron Paul back in the 2008 campaign.
Of course.
So, I mean, it's the same damn thing, and it's happening over and over and over again. And people have such short memories, and they don't understand history. They don't see what's happening here.
No, they don't. It's just what sticks out like a sore thumb about as you're saying those words that you were just saying, Barry Goldwater and his relative supporting Ron Paul. I mean, the only thing that sticks out in my head the whole time as you're saying all those words is just the word Catholic. I just hear that over and over again. I mean, that's really what this the whole right wing is. It's the established right wing Catholic types that are really working and using their agenda for global domination. That's where the global domination comes from. That's where the idea of the world order comes from. People have a misconstrued and jacked up idea because of what they've been programmed by Alex Jones and the rest of these clowns. They have this. It's a wrong idea. People have built up the idea in their head of what the new world order is. They believe it in a wrong way. They tend to think that stuff like the Vatican and the Jesuit order and all this stuff are just sort of side dressing to the think tanks like the CFR and the Bilderberg Group and the banksters and the multinational corporations and stuff. And it's really not that way. Really, at the top, you have the controllers of secret knowledge, controllers of all knowledge of humankind. And through that manipulation of that knowledge, they have created this system that has given us the banks, the credit enslavement system, the religious enslavement system, the multinational corporations, the different divisions of countries, all of this stuff. That's what has given us that. That is who is trying to create this. And there's just no doubt in my mind that the people who Alex Jones and everybody on the right wing, everybody on all sides work for, are these people whose secret knowledge has been used to enslave people of all lands for centuries on this planet.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, a lot of people, they get involved with this, and immediately they're told that stuff pertaining to the Catholic Church or the Jesuits or any of these other religious denominations that pertain to Christianity or these groups that use Christianity as a front. Oh, well, that's not important. You either have to focus in on the Jews or you have to focus in on things pertaining to John Birch Society talking points. And that, to me, is a completely false way of looking at it, because you take a look at how the Catholic Church has spread their religious dogma over the world. I mean, they have dominated South America and Central America for a long period of time, dating back to the 18th century, all the way up until present day. You look at Cuba, for God's sakes, Fidel Castro, he's a friggin' Jesuit. And all these South American leaders and the populations of these countries, just take a look at the amount of Catholics in South American countries, and you'll see that it's a vast majority of the population in many of these South American countries. So this religious ideology that has permeated from the Roman Catholic Church has swept the globe. There's over 1 billion people that follow this religious organization. I mean, this is a major player in this whole world government system. They would not have a following of 1 billion plus people if they weren't. And you want to take a look at what's happening in the Middle East? Well, take a look at Blackwater. Take a look at a lot of these 21st century version crusaders that we see over there that are pushing ahead this whole thing. And take a look at the intelligence organizations and look at the Catholic and Jesuit connections there, the Knights of Malta connections. And it becomes very clear that these are central players to this conspiracy.
Well, absolutely. And you mentioned South America, and they've just completely, like you said, dominated that entire area. And specifically in the Dominican Republic, they have a very interesting thing there. Saul admitted to it was funded and built by the Knights of Malta. It's called the Faro Acolon, and it's in the Dominican Republic, and it's this giant windowless cross-shaped building, and the locals there talk about blood sacrifice happening around the area, and it beams at night. It beams this gigantic holographic cross into the sky. And this thing was built by the Knights of Malta. I mean, this is real. These guys are really doing this. I mean, I'm just blown away when I saw that. I was like, oh, man, But, yeah, it's been what they have wanted us to not find. The whole subgenre of the conspiracy stuff going all the way back to the days of Eustace Mullins and G. Edward Griffin and then on into Anthony J. Hilder. All of these, I don't care who it is. I'm starting to find more and more that this entire quote-unquote conspiracy subgenre was created for people that, as the information revolution and technology was progressing, it was becoming harder and harder to keep information from getting out to people after the rise of the intelligence communities, that they had to start a new mythology. They had to start a new script to get us to follow, and that's what they've done. They've allowed us to believe that we know the whole truth when really we only know a picture of it. And I think the whole thing was created so that people would never really truly find out who was really pulling the strings. They
Absolutely.
just grasp at these decoys all the time.
Right. I 100% agree. And one of the things that I think is very fascinating about the early days of the John Birch Society is that you have people like Willis Carto, Revlo Oliver, Eustace Mullins. A lot of these people, they were members or they were tied in with the John Birch Society. But then a few years later, these people disconnected themselves from the John Birch Society, and you saw how they joined a lot of these groups like the National Alliance. You had William Luther Pierce. You had these British eugenicists like Roger Pearson connected to some of these people. I mean, the list goes on. And you had those people that professed the ideology that, it's the Jew. It's the
that was
Jews.
really the white supremacist end of it. Yeah, because I mean, Carto had brought over Roger Pearson from the head of the Pioneer Fund, and he had been working on all sorts of eugenic stuff. So yeah, that's really the more white supremacist end of it, and I think that merged with the Patriot movement later on. Continue, please, Lee.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's kind of what I'm getting at is that you take a look at how there's a split. And I believe this split was done by design. Just looking at how everything has played out today, because you take a look at the two major radio networks that you have in Patriot Radio. You have Genesis, the Genesis Communications Network, and then you have the Republic Broadcasting Network. Now, GCN, you see how they're primarily focusing around John Birch Society talking points. And of course, then you got Jones talking about the 9/11 conspiracy. So that's pretty much what GCN puts out on their radio broadcast. And then on RBN's side, you have more of the American Free Press stuff, which, of course, Willis Carto runs that whole operation. And you have a lot more people that talked about the Jewish side of the conspiracy. Now, look, I do agree that there are elements of Zionist and powerful Jews in positions of power. I do agree that's part of it, but it's only a part of it. It's not the whole wide encompassing conspiracy. So it seems as if these two camps were created by design to create even further division amongst people who are against the world government system and to further confuse people as to what's really going on. What are your thoughts on that, Josh?
I think it's exactly right. And I think that well, I know that's exactly right. And I'll tell you why I know that's exactly right. And I know why you're laughing, because you, just like I did, my friend, experienced that. You and I lived that, man. We experienced it. We were on these networks where we experienced that. We were both on RBN there for a period of time. We both did shows on WTPRN. And what did we experience over there? We experienced this thing where you had, like you just described, the GCN covers this end, RBN covers this end. But then when you and I would come out with the information we were coming out with at that time, talking about the CMP and other different stuff, people would then try to turn the tables on us and say that we were being the dividers and we were being the people that were coming in and trying to divide and conquer, because what we were doing is we were filling in the context for what neither one of these entities who were really trying to confuse people were giving out. So that is where we've got them now, is because now we can prove that what they have tried to say is what they have left out is what explains why both of these groups are interlocked and interconnected together. They have tried to create cognitive dissonance so that, one end of the people over here believe this, and there's a schism that's created. That has happened as a result of what you just described, by them creating these phony factions and these phony belief systems where people get on one side or one side or the other, instead of all understanding that, look, we're all in this for the same reasons. There should be no separation. The only separation that's being created between truth seekers is being created by these sons of bitches who are creating these different groups like Alex Jones and all the rest of these guys. Those are the guys creating the division, not us, not the people. They are doing it. We're just fine when we're left to our own devices, to our own things to do. We can all research and be our own individuals and work together. But when those guys start coming in the mix, they divide us between each other and nothing ever gets done. They're the problem, not us.
That's exactly right. And we have to try to get people to understand what's going on with this divide and conquer mindset that they have employed through these tactics. I mean, you look at these people, they're using the same tactics, and they've done this over and over and over again, that they accuse people in the New World Order of engaging in. I mean, how many times have we heard Alex Jones bitch about what Glenn Beck is doing to him, even though he has done that or have done a number of these type of things, these same things that he's complaining that Glenn Beck is doing to him, to other people in the realm and scope of the patriot and alternative media.
Oh, he's tried to take people's work that people have done and things that people have made, and well, he did that to me one time. I had found this piece of information. It was even before I was on air. I was still a fan of this guy then. I found out that Paul Wolfowitz had given the speech at West Point Academy, and at that time I was, I got to admit, I was brainwashed into the whole Patriot Truth Movement thing too. So I was making 9/11 New World Rising, my first film, and I'd found this, and I looked high and low everywhere, trying to find anywhere online where anybody had talked about this, and I couldn't find any nary mention of it. And that was a Paul Wolfowitz at West Point clip. I said, you know what? I at that time I thought this was all, I thought it was on one team. I thought that we were, or that we were all working together, and I thought that it wasn't about one person, having a scoop on a story or taking a story from somebody. I just didn't think that would happen. I didn't think that somebody would take a story out of somebody's hands that found a piece of information and then trot it out on their website and act like they brought it out. And that was that information, and Alex Jones did exactly that. I had made the mistake of sending it to his website thinking maybe, hey, here's this piece of info. I found it, just, put my name on it or whatever and say, thanks to Josh Reeves for pointing this out to us and everything will be gravy. And he didn't do that. He made this story, and it was in Prison Planet. He put it on his website. He took full credit for it. And, I've never really told that story that much, but the clip is in my film, but it's absolutely true. And people that knew me and that were around me at the time know that that's the truth. And that's all that matters to me. I just, that was a big thing for me. And just about a month or two after that was when I found out about the CMP, surprisingly enough. And I think that was sort of the karmic wraparound. I think that's what bit Alex Jones on the ass, was the fact that, see, karma's real, isn't it, buddy? Should just give me credit on that. Maybe I wouldn't have found out about the CMP stuff. I doubt that, though, but it was meant to happen. But the point of the matter is that, I experienced that full blown, and that's one of those things where you just, like you said, Lee, you same thing with you. You wanted to work with everybody and everything else. But when this information presents itself to you in the way that it has, and when you really look at it, if you really want the truth, you won't ignore the stuff that Lee and I talk about with the CMP and all the rest of this stuff. If you really want the truth, you'll look at this stuff and you'll look at it legitimately. And you won't just go sit around and name call and go waste your time in a chat room. You don't have a lot of time left. You should use every bit of the time you're lucky enough to have on Earth and do something good with it. So instead of using this stuff for hate and evil energy and allowing them to feed on that hate and negativity energy, which is what they do, why don't you decide just to try something different and not do that for once and actually take a legitimate look at the information Lee and I have talked about on the Council for National Policy and the Jesuits and the John Birch Society, and really see what you really think about that. Come to a decision how you forget all your, forget your belief systems or forget what your emotional attachments to groups and feeling a part of a group and, it feels great to be a part of something. Just let go of all that for a minute and take a serious look at this information and decide for yourself if it's worth it for you to continue in your current paradigm, in your current thinking, or would you be better served, or your interests be better served if you started looking at and taking in all of the information. I promise you, you will be blown away how many more doors and avenues of information, how much broader reaching and larger your understanding for this greater system and bigger system will become once you wake up to the CMP stuff. I know it was that way for me, Lee. I mean, it was just like everything else locked into place and everything made sense. It felt like I had half the story the whole rest of the time.
Oh, you're 100% right. I mean, as soon as I remember when you first came across this information after I believe you interviewed Peter Dale Scott, and you, of course, started looking at all this information. And then when I started looking into it, things just did not add up, and it just made me want to dig even more. And then you find out that, okay, well, people like Paul Craig Roberts, Larry Pratt, and a lot of these are people that are basically mainstay guests on a lot of these radio shows all over Patriot Radio. You start to wonder, okay, well, what's up with this? If they really believe in freedom, if they really believe in fighting the New World Order, why would they even consider becoming a member of this secretive group that has all these globalists, has all these religious zealots, and a lot of these clowns that are associated with it? It made absolutely no sense to me. But once you start putting the pieces of the puzzle together, it makes perfect sense as to why they're involved with these groups, because, as you said, Josh, this entire conspiracy movement was basically set up from the beginning as a controlled opposition mechanism to keep people confused as to what the truth is. And I think, really, that's why after you did that show over at RBN on the Council for National Policy and called all these people out, that's why they canceled your show immediately after, because they couldn't handle that information. They couldn't have that out there.
It undoubtedly was, and I tell you what, because that was that was one of the things I enjoyed. That 6 months I did over there. I did Saturday morning 7 to 9 a.m. on RBN for 6 months, and I busted my butt to do it and got no sleep to do it. But it was the best thing I could ever have done, because it really got my chops for radio honed, and it was a good experience. But I'll tell you what, man, I had a big bunch of listeners in that slot, even more than I do now. I had tons of callers. The show would be jam packed with callers the whole show. And I was starting to get numbers over there that were starting to reach out and touch their bigger weekday shows. And I think that was a problem too. So yeah, after I've been talking about the CMP stuff just a little bit on the show over there at RBN, but yeah, one day I just went on and I said, look, I was talking specifically about what you were mentioning earlier of how they assign the blame of the whole entire New World Order power structure to the middle management, and that's the Jews. And I was talking about, there's a reason why there's Jews in all aspects and facets of the New World Order. It's because that's the front. That's what they want you to believe is the true power, but the true power stays in the background and most people don't suspect it. And I said, a lot of these people who, just say Jew all the time, but they never mention the other end of it, the Catholic end of it, the Jesuit end of it, and that whole end of the stuff with the CMP. There's a reason why they don't do that. There's a reason why they blame it on that, because they're working with these guys. And I said, I'll tell you what, because at that time Larry Pratt was on that network and he was doing his show. I did my show at like 7 in the morning. He did his show at like 7 at night on Saturdays, and he didn't take calls when he was over there, which I always thought was weird. And,
I wonder why. I wonder why Lawrence wouldn't take any phone calls.
But Lawrence Pratt. But I said, so a lot of those guys that say that Jew stuff all the time, a lot of them are on this network and they're working for these guys. And yeah, it was Monday. They got the board op to call me and say, they said they're canceling your show. That's it. No explanation, nothing else. That was it. And somebody speaking of RBN, one of my listeners had pointed out And it said that Jones and Statmiller created a truce and an alliance to take on Oracle and others that might oppose them. Back when Oracle started up, that's what I think. They were fighting at one time. Well, that's absolutely true. And Lee, you remember that broadcast that you and I heard?
Oh, absolutely.
Jones and Statmiller were on there. That sounded like that was directed directly at us, did it not?
Well, there's no question that was, because I'll tell you why. Because this is really funny. Because the week before that broadcast, we're talking about the Friday before this. That's when John Statmiller called me and said that we're going to be moving your slot into something else, and we're going to be doing something different, and your last show's tonight. And I said, no, that's fine, because I was planning on leaving anyway. It wasn't a huge deal.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, fine, because I kind of figured the writing was on the wall, because
yeah, me
of course
too.
Chambers, he was basically being forced out. There's a lot of people that they're forcing out.
Yeah.
So yeah, then the broadcast with him and Jones occurred the Monday after, and they're talking about how, well, we really got rid of the COINTELPRO off these networks, and we're going to work together. And I was thinking, are you freaking kidding me? Just a year and a half ago, there was a huge blow up, or it might have been a couple of years ago. I forget exactly.
At that time, it was just about a year and a half before that. You're
okay.
Correct.
So I was correct. Okay, well, yeah. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, but anyway, there was a huge blow up between Jones and Statmiller, and they were on air and they were fighting back and forth. Jones even called into Jack Blood's show and was yelling about how he's going to sue Statmiller, his wife, and the employees of RBN. It was just complete madness. And so I have to wonder if a lot of these shenanigans between Jones and Statmiller, if all of that's just a big farce, if it's all staged, and it's all one big joke behind the scenes. And I wouldn't be surprised if that were true.
Oh, absolutely it is. I mean, look at where all these guys started from. I mean, Statmiller came from up in that same area where GCN started. He started GCN, right?
He was one. I'm not exactly sure if he started GCN, but he was certainly one of the early people that was involved with it.
Okay,
I'm still trying to piece together the history behind it. I
want to say Statmiller did started GCN, and then he later sold it to somebody else, and then he got sold to Ted Anderson after that, or Donna Gashaya, whoever owns it now. But regardless of that, it was all one big circle. I mean, John Statmiller, when he first came down from Michigan or wherever it was he came down from, he was living with Alex Jones in a little one-bedroom apartment for a longest time. And Alex Jones was doing a Saturday show on RBN. Yeah, that's fact.
There's all sorts of weird stuff. I mean, they have a really long history together. That's the thing that's really strange. And then on our show that Statmiller did, he said that he discovered Jones on commercial radio. And I don't know how true or not true that is. That's him saying this. But clearly, when you take a look at Statmiller and Jones, there's a long history between those two figures. And so that's why I believe that whole thing was just another staged farce. And it seems like they have one of these staged farces every year or so with one host fighting with our host or whatever.
And I told you about how that Freedom 21 conference I went to in 2008, where I got that footage I talked about, and all those CMP guys were there. I told you, yes, Statmiller was there, and that was shortly after he had fired me. And there were some interesting things that I saw there, but some of which I won't mention on there.
You want to share some?
I don't know, man. I mean, if you want me to, I will. I mean, I did see something. I don't know. I don't know if it's appropriate, but it's I can say it in the most appropriate way, I suppose.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know, man. I have two other witnesses to this, and this is absolutely true. We were at this hotel where this conference is at. And we saw John Statmiller, like he did this like prance, like this "you go girl," like oh my god, this like like with his like kind of limp wrist thing, kind of like a limp wrist like little dance thing by the counter. We were like, what the hell? Look at Statmiller. He's like doing like he's doing like a little pansy dance or something, like "you go girl." He was like doing some shit like that. We're like, what in the hell is going on here? And so we were sitting there looking, and then later on, I noticed that we'd been at this restaurant down the street, and there was these two gay guys that were eating at this restaurant down the street. And we noticed, oh wow, they must be staying at our hotel too. And so we couldn't get to our rooms from the lobby, so we had to go back out this out back door. It was wonky to get back into where our rooms were at. It was totally weird. And so we were going back out of the lobby to get back to where our rooms. And about that time, I saw the two gay guys go on the elevator, and right behind them onto this elevator, I guess maybe they just happened to be coincidentally going on the elevator all together to go to their separate rooms, I'm sure. John Stoutmiller walks and gets on the elevator of these two gay guys. I'm sure they were all going to their own separate rooms and everything else, and I'm just making assumptions. But I did witness that. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with me telling the truth that I did witness that, and two other people I know witnessed that as well. But I also saw him the next day at the conference, and it was like middle of the day, like this. It was called the luncheon with Phyllis Schlafly, and everybody eats lunch, and everybody was there. Of course, he was back over there hanging out. I mean, the whole crew was there, man. It was great. Michael Kaufman was there. Larry Pratt was there. Phyllis Schlafly was there. Who's the other guy? The News with Views guy.
Shoot, what's his name? I can't think.
You know who I'm talking about. But anyway, all the whole crew was there. And anyway, I see Stadtmiller, man, and he's dressed to the nines, like in a tux, like he's going to prom. I'm like, what in the heck is Stadtmiller wearing over there? I mean, he was like, just a tux, dude. And he was talking to one of the John Birch Society minions that was there, that was doing a presentation on how the Rockefellers are into Gaia worship, and they're trying to bring in all this UN stuff because they're Gaia worshipers. And it was just like, well, I was just sitting there wanting to raise my hand if they didn't have questions. I was going to say, hey, well, how come, the group that you were brought here to represent has been tied into the Rockefellers? I mean, it just seemed odd to me. But yeah, I mean, at this conference, it did seem, you did sort of get the idea that everybody was here for the same ideology, for the same thing, and just continuing that. But I forgot what I was. Oh, Stadtmiller. So anyway, after that, I go outside and I see Stadtmiller. He's like smoking a cigarette and he's on a cell phone and he's talking about that John Birch Society guy. He had just gotten off stage and he said, "Yeah, I think this is the type of guy that represents what we want to say on our radio network." And he was talking about this guy, and I went, "Oh yeah, I guess the John Birch Society guy represents that." So yeah, I think intimately there is a connection. I think if you have John Stadtmiller associating with John Birch Society types, and then you already have that connection to the John Birch Society types with Alex Jones, the idea that these two have been working together intimately, and this is probably some larger operation of divide and conquer that's been going on for quite some time, I think you'd be justified in believing that.
Well, sure. Not only that, but you see somebody like Mike Rivero, who all of a sudden has a falling out on GCN. Then just a few days later, he winds up on RBN doing a weekday show, just like that. It's almost as if they just stage these operations time and time again, and it's really just a big farce. I mean, the whole thing is just completely crazy. But also, it's interesting that you mentioned that strange story. I mean, that is a kind of a bizarre story. But yeah. I mean, you take a look at the fact that a lot of these organizations that are really at the forefront of this whole agenda, like the Jesuits and the Catholic Church, I mean, you have all sorts of reports of how they're involved in homosexual behavior, pedophilia. And I just want to get to your take on this story. I'm not sure if you saw this, but, and of course, you didn't hear this story anywhere around any of these radio networks. They didn't talk about this, but the Jesuits up in the northwestern part of the United States, they actually had to pay a settlement of $166.1 million because of the fact that they were raping Aboriginal children or Indian children up there, doing all sorts of horrible stuff. So I take it you heard about this?
Yes. Yeah, that was a huge story. Yeah, that was a huge admission. And yeah, you got swept under the rug.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, that's a big story. And you would think that somebody like Jones would be talking about it. For God's sakes, I mean, that's some pretty disgusting behavior. But it seems as if anytime there's anything related to the Jesuits or the Vatican that really exposes them in this fashion, you don't see any sort of coverage from them at all. It's like it doesn't exist. It's like I remember that time when We Are Change, they confronted, who was it, Pat Buchanan on something? Yeah. They confronted Pat Buchanan on I forget what it was. I don't even know if they even showed the video, to be quite honest with you. But that never came to the forefront. Or when We Are Change, they confronted the Black Pope. Well, that wasn't anywhere on the InfoWars sites. Not at all.
Well, yeah, they actually, the Pat Buchanan thing, I don't think ever surfaced. What was interesting about that is in the New World Order documentary that IFC made, you see Luke Radowski talking, and there's a stack of tapes that there are people that they confronted, and you see quite clearly on a tape, on video, a tape labeled Pat Buchanan. But I don't recall ever seeing a confrontation where they confronted Pat Buchanan. Jones probably told him not to air it, but that's absolutely true. about the other thing though. Yeah, the We Are Change out there. I tried contacting that group. I wanted to get them on my show to talk about it. They wouldn't even respond back to me. I don't know what was going on. That maybe it was staged. I don't know, but that should have been huge. They confronted the Black Pope, and a lot of people don't even believe the Black Pope exists. Yeah,
leader of the Jesuits.
There are people who believe the Black Pope is a conspiracy theory. He's a real guy.
Yeah, didn't you do a show one time where somebody was in your chat room saying, "Oh, the Black Pope doesn't exist," and then you got an audio feed of the Black Pope giving a speech, like live?
We did that. We actually did that here on Oracle, as a matter of fact. We did live here on Oracle when I was in the show here. We went live to a live audio feed of the whatever his name is, the Inspector Grand General of the Jesuit Society of Jesus is giving his speech in San Francisco. Yeah, San Francisco of all places. You knew he had to be there to speak.
Oh, but the Bohemian Grove connections with St. John Nepomuk. That figure is revealed.
Another huge connection, Lee. Yeah. But we went direct to the live to the Black Pope feed. And there were people who really, literally at that time were saying, thank you for playing that, because I literally believed until I heard that audio that the Black Pope was a conspiracy theory and that he wasn't somebody who actually existed. That's how little this type of information has reached people at all, Lee, is that people believe a person who actually exists is a conspiracy theory, and then a guy who may or may not have existed, we don't have any evidence existed. We'll leave out your name there, Jesus, but they believe in that guy. You know what I mean? But the Black Pope is a real guy, but they don't believe in him. But they believe in a guy that they can't prove exists. I don't know. I'm confused by that.
Yeah, and then they worship him, they revere him, but I mean, look, let's face it, folks. We cannot 100% verify that even Jesus existed. I mean, because of the fact that a lot of the stories surrounding his life appear to be based off of astrological references. It almost seems like, I mean, I'm not saying that Jesus didn't exist, okay? Let me just put that out there.
Yeah, I'm not either.
Yeah, but we don't know either way. That's the problem. I don't believe there is 100% verifiable proof that we can point to that says, yes, okay, there was this man named Jesus, and he did all these wonderful things. And he did this, he rose from the dead, and that's why we celebrate Easter. We can't point to anything that proves these things conclusively. We're just supposed to go off of faith. I had some whack job preacher call me. This is when I had a bunch of prank callers calling in like a few weeks ago, and he actually told me that since I didn't believe everything he was telling me about his religion, that I was being deceived. Oh, okay, so I'm being deceived because I'm using my intellect to look at a story that doesn't make sense. But yet I'm being deceived because I don't blindly believe something. I mean, it's just crazy how these people think. I mean, we have a long way to go, man. That's all I can say.
Yeah, that is the whole thing about it. But yeah, I think that my evidence is pointing me in the direction that really what the stories of Jesus and all this stuff are based off of, were based off these ancient tales. I mean, because of Ea reincarnating in different incarnations. I think that they took these stories that existed for thousands of years, stripped all of the context, all of the meaning, all the important bits out of them, and then created this amalgamation. I think the energy of the person who they say was Jesus existed, but the evidence that it existed in the form of what they tell us it is up for contention. I mean, he appeared in Mexico in a different form, the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl, and said all the same things and did all the same things. I mean, I just still find it interesting that all these guys are saying, don't put any other gods before me or messiahs before me. Well, if you're the only one, then how can we put any other ones above you if there aren't more than one? See, that's where you get these guys at. So I think you had guys that were going these different, maybe they were extraterrestrials or whatever have you, but they're basically going around different parts of the world and realizing they could just go and mess around and play around with stuff and, crossbreed humans and all this stuff and then make them believe that they were gods. And this happened all over the place, and it just happened regionally all over the planet. Then these creation religions were built around that and used as a mechanism of control, and it continues to this day.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. It's really amazing how it all fits together when you see all these crucified saviors and these people or these deities that have been given to various peoples around the world, and how they have all these similarities, these very similar characteristics, like Krishna, Adonis. I mean, there's a bunch of these different figures, Horus, and the list goes on and on. It's really amazing, and it really makes you question as to, okay, well, how can you say that this Jesus character is really that much different than all these are, as you put, these amalgamations of what appears to be the same story, or at least a similar story? You should ask some questions about why that is. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people that follow the various denominations of the Christian religion, the Catholic Church, that don't really look beyond that. They just take everything at face value instead of looking at it further. But Josh, we've been going at this for about an hour straight. I don't know. Do you want to take a break real quick?
Yeah, let's do that, man.
Okay, well, let's, because I'm getting kind of gassed. But
yeah, me too.
On the other side of the break, I want to get into your interview you did with William Bramley.
All right.
And talk a little bit about that. Of course, William Bramley was the writer of the Gods of Eden book, which I got a copy of this because I was very fascinated with some of the stuff that you were reading from it on your show. And I got to tell you what, there's a lot of very interesting information in this book. So I definitely want to get into the interview with William Bramley that you did and get into some of the material that's in this book, because I think it's very fascinating. It fills in a lot of gaps that I had in my research. And also it verifies a lot of the stuff that I've already looked into. So we will get into all of that on the other side of the break. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to play some tunes real quick. And then when we come back in about, I think we'll play like maybe 5 or 6 minutes worth of music. When we come back, we'll get into all that information and much more. So folks, all right, well, we are back. I'm joined here again with my guest, Josh Reeves. You can check out his website at theglobalreality.com, and he's joining us for his monthly visit here on the show. And, of course, we're doing a commercial-free show, as we do each and every time that he comes on. And, Josh, I want to get your take on an interview you did on your radio show with author and researcher William Bramley. And I heard some of your shows that you were doing, and you were reading from his book, which I guess it came out in the late 1980s. Very interesting book, because it gets into a lot of these, a lot of information on these secret societies, these religious institutions. It even goes back to the Brotherhood of the Snake, the origins of secret societies, custodial gods, also known as extraterrestrials, depending upon your point of view. A very fascinating book, and I was looking through some of the chapters, and it was very interesting. And I was just wondering what your take was on your interview with Bramley, because I heard bits and pieces of it. I didn't get a chance to hear the entire thing, but it was kind of funny. During the interview, you made this really good point about the Jesuits and the Catholic Church, and then all of a sudden, for some strange reason, the phone connection went dead or something. It was very, very weird. But I was just wondering if I get your take on what you thought of Mr. Bramley and the interview you did with him.
That part was weird. It was really freaking weird, because it seemed that I felt like I was having flashbacks. You know, it didn't matter what network I've ever been on. Even if it was back to the TrueNet Radio days, Oracle, it didn't matter. Whenever we'd have certain guests on, Michael Tessarian or others, we would always have weird dropouts and things happen when we would get into juicy information. And he does talk about the Jesuits and really get in the Catholic order, and really their whole ties into the world order system, and how that ties into the custodial races, the bloodlines, and the rest of it. I mean, the best I've ever seen in this book, The Gods of Eden. And so, that was odd, and we did kind of get sidetracked on that. And because I was over here running the tech end of the stuff, and trying to get him reconnected while talking, and not making there be dead air, and running Sam Broadcaster, I'm sitting there. By the time we get back on, I couldn't remember what my point was about. And I did find that was an odd thing. But Bramley is an interesting character, because he was one of these guys who, from what I understand, he sort of got into trying to figure out the origins of war. And why humans are constantly told that we are just naturally inclined for warfare, and he was trying to disprove that. And as he was going back and digging more and more and finding the roots of warfare, lo and behold, he stumbled upon all of this stuff that pertains to these ancient aliens and the custodial masters and all the rest of this. So that's inevitably where his book went. But the book's a great piece on. We've been reading it, doing a series of reading on my show over the past couple of months, and a lot of that stuff's up on YouTube now, where people can go and check that out. There's one that's like the first 12 chapters condensed down into one video, so people can go to YouTube and find that and listen to that when they'd like to. Because what I do is I read the books, and then as I'm reading, I sort of, add in my little 2 cents. And sometimes the stuff that we discover and come across, everything in the book so far has just reinforced everything that we've discovered about the Council for National Policy, the phony patriots, the Jesuit order. I mean, it really ties it in. And it really, to me, the big aha moment of reading this, Lee, has been this idea of understanding this. Now we understand fully why, as Bramley had, or not Bramley, rather, but I guess it was Bramley had talked about, how goofy the whole ufology and the whole UFO research community is. It's just this weird, goofy amalgamation, and there's nothing really going on towards real research and everything. And I think that's a part of the control paradigm. And then the other end of that is you have people like Alex Jones and others that would always say, looking into UFOs and all this stuff and Anunnaki stuff is a distraction. Focus on the bankers and the rest of this. So when I really understood from reading this how ensconced the Jesuit order and the religious hierarchy of power that connects into the CMP and the rest of it has been, it was a big aha moment of going, oh, that explains it. This is why they've deflected people away from this. But as far as William Bramley goes in the interview and whatnot, he was a guy that, again, he's not a researcher by trade. And so he's had, 20 years or whatever removed from reading this book. And so a lot of the stuff some of the stuff I was talking about, he didn't really have a reference point for, and that's okay. That's understandable. He's not really hip to everything, but other things, I sort of got the idea that he felt that in the past 20 years, what he's seen and all the things that have happened throughout the world have been a reaffirmation to him of this information that he'd written about, and he's basically retired. And he, if you ask him to come on the show, he'll come on the show and do a polite interview, but you just can't expect that he's going to be as hip to a lot of the information as a lot of us are, because he's just not into that frame of mind. But the book is a great piece on, to me, filling in all the blanks. If you're really looking for a book that will fill in a lot of the blanks that have been left out from the Patriot movement, the Controlled Truth movement, and the rest of this stuff, this book really fills in the blanks, I think, in the best way I've probably read, because it really lets you know what the other end of the world order system that you haven't heard about is, and who's controlling it, where it comes from, and why all this chaos and warfare and keeping us enslaved, what it's really about. And definitely gets into some of the stuff about, the soul being entrapped, and in the enslavement of the soul for slave labor in this physical material realm. And they had this technology to enslave people's souls and to keep us trapped here. And that he had talked about, researching the Rosicrucians and researching the Freemasonry, but much the same way I had. And I discovered a couple of years ago that the real secret of what these secret societies have is how to transcend the death of the physical body and the soul coming back down to earth and inhabiting another body. They want to forgo that process so they can go into other realms of existence. And this is why the Rosicrucian order has the symbol of the rosy cross. The rose on top of the cross represents the soul, the non-material body being crucified upon the physical body. That's what it represents, and that's what they teach. And those teachings existed long before the Rosicrucians. They existed long before the Freemasons, and they originate as far back as I've been able to find as 5,000 years in Asia, in Tibet, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead is vital to understand. And most people don't understand what it is. And I read it about 10 years ago and understood even then what it meant. And it's always stuck with me. And what it is, you're supposed to read a page out of this book for a successive number of days. I don't remember how many it is, but the amount of days that you read this has to do with the amount of days it takes for the soul to either reincarnate in a body back on earth or go into other realms. And you read out of this book every day. And what this book is supposed to do is, by you reading it to the shell that held the now deceased and soul that's left the body, it's supposed to be able to send that person messages into the etherical planes on how to not be what they call distracted by the things that you see in these etherical realms. For instance, the Tibetan Book of the Dead talks about how you're going to be confronted with things like that are going to be like demonic, enemy entities and things that are going to try and use fear as a weapon against you to get you to be scared and want to go back into the comfort of the body.
That sounds
That's what
familiar.
it talks about.
That sounds
the comfort.
familiar.
Yeah, it sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it talks about, how it's going to scare you into wanting to be attached to the comfort of the body. And it says, as you keep reading it to the person's body each day, it teaches that the soul how to understand that these things are there to distract you. They're there to put fear into you, and they're not real. And when you realize that, oh my goodness, as real as that looks in front of me, it's an illusion and it's not there, it disappears. And then you're allowed to ascend up into other realms of existence that aren't the dense, low vibratory sense reality of Earth. That is, to me, Lee, the key secret teaching of the ancient societies, that and the technology of anti-gravity. That's those two things. Those are the two key elements of understanding that the elite are using and keeping from us, that are keeping their system in order. If you look at things like the Coral Castle in Florida that was built by this guy who had all this ancient knowledge of this technology, that's what he was using. He was using anti-gravity stuff to lift these stones and create these things and he even said that, it went back to the ancient teachings of the Egyptians on how to lift these stones. So, yeah, those two things are really the understanding that they're keeping from us and keeping us enslaved with, Lee. And that's what's perpetuating the system and allowing it to continue is our lack of knowledge of it. But I think now the genie's out of the bottle and we have more people awake on this planet to this information than we've ever had. And I think that's it gives you a lot of comfort understanding that, because it does mean we still have a chance.
Yeah, well, you brought up a lot of very interesting points, and I think there's no question that the ancients, and I'm not just talking about the ancient Egyptians or the Mayans, but even human beings that were here prior to the Great Flood that's documented in a lot of these religious texts, I firmly believe that these people had a much greater spiritual understanding of the world around them than we have today. I think a lot of that's been lost or hidden by design as a result of these priest-class entities and these secret societies that have formed throughout the years. It's all very intriguing information, no question about it. But it's interesting that you mentioned what you did about the UFO community, because, man, I tell you what, there are some real disinfo artists. There are some real spooks out there in the UFO community that talk about how they got kidnapped by the Palladians or whatever. I mean, all this crazy stuff that they have no way of proving or have any real evidence to prove that, okay, X, Y, and Z happened. Yeah. And I think what you said is 100% correct, because they intentionally put out all these disinfo artists and operatives that appear on Coast to Coast AM. They talk about their alien abduction stories and everything else with no real proof and all sort of crazy stuff. They make it sound as crazy and zany as possible. And they do that to discredit legitimate information on UFOs, on extraterrestrials, ancient astronauts, and things of that sort. And then even when you look at the more credible information, they got some of these Jesuit stooges like that. What's that guy's name? That guy at what's it? Folco, I think his name is, the Jesuit. He's on the Ancient Alien show, and he was tied in with Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ. And then you got those characters involved with even the information that is more credible than the goofy stuff they put out there. So there's just such an attempt to make a lot of this information surrounding UFOs and ancient astronauts and things like that to be entirely discredited. And I believe they do that because they want to guide people who are trying to find the truth about this stuff down these rabbit trails that they can't escape from. But in the same token, they're also putting the information out so people will believe that there's something to it, but they don't want people to know the full truth about what they know. And I think it's really a multi-layered attack, it seems, that they have with this UFO stuff that they put out there.
Yeah, it's classic gatekeeper stuff, man. I mean, they that's why they put people out there who seem to appear to know what they're talking about. That's why these experts are considered to be the experts. The reason they're considered to be the experts is because they're given the information that the public is given, and they're given the information that the public isn't given. It's one of the perks of the job. And so
that's right.
Because in order to be an expert on it, they have to know the entire truth, because the only way that they can effectively water it down and effectively provide adequate disinformation is if they have knowledge of the true knowledge of everything. That way they can say, They know, because you can't program, you can't just tell somebody how to do that. You understand? I mean, you know that, Leo. A human has to experience something, all the knowledge of something before they can then learn how to use part of it while keeping the rest of it secret. That's a microcosm for the whole larger system. What these gatekeepers do is they know full well. Alex Jones knows full well the layers of the onion that you and I discuss. He knows all of it. I guarantee you he does.
There's no way he can't. The guy's been involved with this for 15-something years. I've been doing this for roughly 4 years, and I'm talking about a lot more information than he is, and he's been doing this for 15 years. He knows full well what we're talking about with a lot of this info, no question.
Yep, he sure does, and that's why he's effective at being able to leave out certain bits and knows exactly where to draw the line, because he has an understanding of the entire thing. If he didn't have an understanding of the entire power structure, and I mean, again, of the information that you and I discuss and whatnot, then he wouldn't be able to effectively gatekeep that information, because inherently he would slip up and he would get too far off into one end, but he hasn't. And there's that's the distinct reason why. So the same thing that happened, that's how the whole power structure took place right there. That is a microcosm for how the entire power structure came to rise, is because and Bramley talks about this in the Gods of Eden as well. He talks about how the people that had, it was really the first people that, for whatever reason, whether it was chance or fate or, predestination, what have you, I'll leave that up to everybody else to decide. But in the beginning, for whatever reason, the first people that had mystical experiences or experiences communicating with extraterrestrials or disembodied entities or spiritual entities or anything else, all of these people, no matter what part of the planet it happened on, these people inherently came back with knowledge beyond what they could have gotten on Earth from anything that existed at that time. Those people were the ones that became the priests. Those are the ones that became the first people. They gained their power out of the experiences that they, again, either had by chance or by fate or whatever have you. But it really just, the original priests really just lucked into it. They were the first ones that had these spiritual experiences, and they started figuring out that this information was so mind-blowing and had so much power to it that one could gain an even greater power by only giving people part of the story and using the rest for controlling the bits that you keep out is what gives you the power. Because if that rest of the story gets out to the people, where does the power go? It's not in the power of the priests anymore. It's in the power of the people. That's why the information that these people have been holding from us for all these years is importantly, because that is this silver bullet, magic bullet solution everybody's been looking for. That's it. The fact of the matter is that their power is gained by withholding information from us. If we have the power, they no longer can have control over us, and that's why in the beginning the priests gained so much power, and this continued on from the time of Samaria to Assyria to Babylon to Egypt, Rome, Greece, on into the modern day, and it continues to perpetuate itself. And it's always those people at the very top that they're withholding the information, and this happened again all over the planet. And I think that's the real linchpin. Once people understand that, and now we're starting to unravel, and once people start to realize what the right question to ask is, people don't even understand that there are questions we need to be asking pertaining to this ancient knowledge that they've been keeping from us to give themselves power, that we need to have entered into the human vocabulary. We need to all be able to have the knowledge to ask the question, where did we really come from? Where did life on this planet really originate from? What are humans who are unfettered and untouched by programming and at a very early age, and all of this programming of this education system and all the chemicals in the food and water? What is the true potential of a human being not held back? Because everything in our society, from the food to the water to the air to the programming to the media to the culture, all of it is designed as a one gigantic leash around our neck from the time we're born. And we can't break free from it. Somebody from the time we're born into this realm has a leash around our neck, and they're holding us back. That's what this information is. There is something about us that is so powerful, or has the potential to be so powerful, that if it's unleashed and if we find out what it is, it's going to bring this power structure down. That's where the fight is, ladies and gentlemen. The fight is not out there in the phony patriot movement, the phony truth movement, or armed conflict, or the teabaggers, or any of this people. The fight is right there. The fight is the fight for understanding, and the fight to be able to have the knowledge that will no longer restrict our potential as a species. That's where the fight is. That's the people we have to go after. That's the people that we have to expose. Those people who are withholding this information, and Alex Jones and the CMP and the phony patriots and all these guys are playing the biggest part in that right now. Why can't you people understand this? We're begging you to understand this, Lee.
Well, yeah, I've been getting kind of frustrated with some of the things that you're talking about because, I mean, look, we've been talking about this stuff for 2 to 3 years now. Okay, and there are still people who know full well what we're talking about here, but they refuse to look at the information. Or they just want to say, oh, well, no, well, Lee's a Jew or something like that. They'll make some stupid comment, or they'll make some ad hominem attack that makes absolutely no sense and has nothing at all that pertains to the information that we're talking about here. The fact of the matter is that all of this information is very important. It ties directly in with the world order system. And I thought all you people out there were against world government. I thought you were against all these organizations that are pushing ahead this world government system. Well, there's all sorts of proof that indicates that these groups that we're talking about are pushing ahead the world government system. We're not making this stuff up. Josh, I have never had to go out of my way to invent a conspiracy. Never in the 4+ years I've been doing this type of stuff, my website and radio, I have not had to invent a conspiracy. This information is out there. It's verifiable. There are multiple sources that can prove all this, and I just wish people would take it more seriously. It's kind of sad that they don't. But Josh, I just want to hit on one thing you mentioned real quick about how the priests use information that they withhold from people to maintain their power. And I think that's 100% correct in terms of what's happening with the religious power structure. But it's very interesting because in the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, at the very beginning of the film, you kind of see an allegorical reference to what you're discussing there. You see how in the beginning you have the planet and you have all the primates that are there just living peacefully, and then the monolith arrives. And then all of a sudden, after these primates touch the monolith, after they get intellect, they get knowledge. They get knowledge of how to swing this bone and to kill with it. So they have this knowledge that our primates don't have, and that makes them very powerful. So I think even a film like that, and of course we know that Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick, they were tied directly in with the power structure in many ways. I think that in a nutshell is really a good reference to point somebody to say, hey, they're doing the same thing just as presented in this movie with the primates and the knowledge that they had, only it's being done on a different level. And I think that's important. I think that's an important point to make, just to illustrate how this whole thing works.
Well, you see it microcosmically and macrocosmically all over the place. You see it when you look at technology, when you look at how how the technology is just decades above what we ever know about. And I've talked about that on my show before, and you've probably seen this as well, being into computers. I remember back in 2004, I had bought whatever the tip top of the pyramid of AMD chips were at that time. I think it was maybe one of the first 64 bits they came out with. It was I just built a big gaming system that was all tricked out. And when I was putting this thing together, this chip had literally just came out the day I bought it. And I noticed when I was putting it into the motherboard that on the chip itself it said copyright 1999. And I went, this is 2004. This chip just came out today. This is proof right here that at minimum they had this 64-bit processor as early as 1999, if not before that. And I could have heard of that for years. And to me, that was one of those moments where, when you see it for yourself, when you go, oh man, it's absolutely true that they keep us in this state of arrested development by withholding the technology from us. And they withhold the technology from us in the same way that they hold the information from us. And it's like they have this plan that's passed down to the hierarchy and the power structure from year to year, where it just is constantly garnered, where the power structure just perpetuates itself. When the old guard dies off, the new guard is there, trained, ready to take over, and it just perpetuates itself over and over again. And I really am seeing this correlation between the rise of technology and also the rise of knowledge and the rise of information. People now are even, I mean, I know it's still bad out there. I know there are a lot of dumbass people out there that don't pay attention to any of this stuff, but you know, there still are more people alive right now who know more about the elite power structure than they ever have on the planet, Lee. And so, you know, that's as a result of the technology increasing. We now have access to all this information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Everything is interconnected, and that also has increased the amount of information. It's also unleashed a very, very dangerous thing for the elite, because now humankind is going to start to accelerate at a rate that's probably beyond what they're ready for. I think that's why everything is ramping up right now, is because I think that it's spiraling out of their hands and out of their control. I think that people are waking up at a faster rate than they can keep up with, and I think that's why they're trying to perpetuate all the rest of this fear-mongering stuff. And you know, every day now, I mean, you saw the news yesterday, Lee, for God's sakes. I mean, it was the end of the world in every single story that was in the news yesterday, wasn't it?
Well, there's a lot of garbage out there. I mean, garbage. I'll be honest with you, man. I mean, I'm so frustrated with the news cycle. I get up here on this show sometimes, and I'm just like, you know what, screw it. I don't feel like covering this crap, because I talk about this stuff day in and day out. It's the same garbage over and over again. I mean, how many times can I talk about the economy? How many times I can talk about the Federal Reserve or the phony terror war or these fake Al-Qaeda figures that are working for British intelligence or whatever that they're doing these days, or the Middle East? I mean, all this stuff, it's one story after another. Or the police state. I mean, yeah, they're setting up an enslavement system. I mean, all this stuff is obvious. But you're right. A lot of it's centered around all of this fear and end of the world. And of course, I think that ties in with the 2012 thing that they have been hyping for a while. And I don't know, man. I tell you what, it's going to be an interesting 2 years. That's for sure. This year and next year, I think it's going to be very interesting. And that's why I'm going to be definitely doing as many shows as I can from between this day and when we finally hit the so-called proverbial Mayan doomsday. Because, man, I mean, there's all sorts of agendas at play here. But, you know, I think you're right. I mean, in one aspect, some of their programs are failing. I mean, their population reduction programs have been miserable failures. And I think that's one positive we can look at. I mean, the world's population keeps rising. I want to say something real quick, though. You are right, but you know what? I've just come across this recently, and I haven't had a chance to discuss this with you, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I was just thinking this the other day. I was thinking, when I go on with Lee, I got to remember to bring this up to him, but I don't remember how. So you gave me a perfect opportunity there. Okay,
so it's great. I just looking at all this. I guess it was about a week ago. You and I had talked about we were looking at that Pioneer Fund book. We were online. We were discussing that. Remember that? Okay.
Yeah, actually, I got the copy of that a few days ago.
Oh, you did? Good.
Yep.
It's some interesting stuff in there, huh?
Well, I just thumbed through it, and it's funny how, and for the benefit of the audience, the Pioneer Fund is a group that's tied directly with Eugenics. Just look them up. Do a Google search on the Pioneer Fund. Look up the bell curve. Look up a lot of these characters, and you'll see how it ties into all this racial science and eugenics. It's really incredible. But yeah, I mean, I was thumbing through the book, and they basically admit to, eugenics is okay, and yeah, we believe in these various ideologies, and they just admit it. It was like a book that was written for people who were tied in with the Pioneer Fund or who were friendly with the Pioneer Fund, and because they don't believe that any regular dumbass out there that watches National Football League games is even going to remotely try to find a book like that. So they just admit to everything in the book. It's really fascinating. So anyway, after you and I had been talking about that, I had been looking at that quite a bit and looking at that stuff and working on the film. And I started noticing that, you know, going back and looking at these eugenics things and what we've termed as eugenics. I mean, yes, I think that the term eugenics and the programs that keep the human populations down at a certain level, it's very odd, because on one hand, yes, you can see the correlation between eugenics and the population to keep the population culling is basically what it is. Keep it down to a certain level. You can see those two intimately tied together, but for a moment, separate the two.
Forget everything you think you know about eugenics and the whole idea of that. Keep that over or to the side for a minute and just think about population reduction scenarios. Now, the one thing that we've seen about these population reduction scenarios is they're there almost as a stopgap, almost to just because, as you said, they haven't really been that effective. So really, what is the point of it? Well, the point of it is that it is the larger operation, and this is what I believe now after looking at eugenics 100 different ways. I believe now that the eugenics program has been more about producing overpopulation than cutting down from it. And the reason that is because now through all of this genetic tinkering and all this different stuff that they've been doing, they have been overpopulating and creating overpopulation cycles and committing genocide in certain areas where they want to wipe out certain parts of the bloodlines, especially in the Middle East, my goodness. South America, too, all over the world, really. And so what they've done is they've been able to create this market of cheap labor and slave labor all over the world by allowing a population explosion while still running population culling programs that, as you said, may not be fully effective, some more than others. Definitely cancers and all these things that they have cures for in the back room somewhere. Certainly these are, HIV and AIDS and all this stuff. All this stuff has been unleashed bioweapons, but they have created this slave market economy where they're just they're overpopulating everything so they can keep the labor that perpetuates the system low and keep everybody in a state of indentured servitude, because when you're only worried about having to put food on the table or a roof over your head or anything else, you're not going to have time to worry about, whether the Anunnaki were screwing around with our DNA 5,000 years ago, or whether or not, the Black Pope is real or isn't. No, you're only going to be concerned about whether or not you're going to have a place to sleep at night and something to eat. You're not going to worry about who the controller and the rulers are. And that's how they've kept this thing in power for years and years and years, Lee. So I think that the whole eugenics depopulation thing and the way that it's been presented to us by the Truth Movement and the Patriot Movement, specifically in Alex Jones' movie Endgame, I think it's been a flawed construct and a misconstruing of what eugenics in the overpopulation reduction programs are, and construing it into an amalgamation where, as we said before, you're still not getting the whole truth. And they're gaining power by giving people not the whole truth about this. And then Alex Jones uses it to sell products and fearmonger and get people to tune into his show and everything else. So I think that this is a clear-cut case where, yes, all these things are real, and we know that they are, but they've been they've been twisted and turned into something else. I think that the rise of the slave labor, cheap slave labor, and then in turn later some massive blood sacrificial ritual that'll probably be some false flag or something like that is probably what they're going to do.
Well, I think I don't really disagree with what you're saying, Josh. I mean, I think you're definitely on the right track with it. I think probably the better term to use instead of population reduction is population management. And I think that's largely what eugenics is designed to do, because what is the purpose of eugenics? It's according to these race scientists and these people that believe in this science, it's to improve the human race through selective breeding. That's generally what's considered to be the concept of eugenics. They want to improve various aspects of the human race. Now, of course, you can also look at the other way. They can take different population pools and try to degenerate that particular population pool, whereas in our population pool, they're going to try to promote the better traits of that population pool and try to get them to be the best that they can be. And so I don't think you're off base on it. I mean, I just think it's more of a population management tool that they're using here with this science. So in some cases, there's population reduction. In our cases, they might want the population to rise for whatever reason. But the one thing I do see coming down the pipe is that with technology increasing to such an extent, I don't believe that these people are going to need vast sums of slave labor in the next 100 or so years, because the technology will be able to replace a lot of the slave labor that they've been utilizing. So, I can't see the future, obviously, but I do think that this eugenic science plays a critical role in their future plans for humanity. and also technology. And how they're going to go about doing this, I really don't know. But they still need a population of slave labor to keep the system going, because if they don't have the system running, then they lose their power. So it's vital for them to ensure the system continues to operate. I still think eugenics plays a key role in this whole management operation that they have going.
And, according to William Bramley, and again in his book, The Gods of Eden, one of the key pieces of information in that book is he indicates that these population control programs have been running for centuries. I mean, he has evidence of them going back, to the time of the Black Death and the plagues and stuff. And the reports in these different villages of men in what would be termed spacesuits with like these wands of dust, and then the next day, everybody 100 miles of this place is dead. Weird lights in the sky.
I hate to interrupt you, but wasn't there some paintings from the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, in which you actually have depictions of flying saucers and UFOs?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that ties into it, but
it does, because there was reports of like streaks through the sky and stuff, basically like chemtrails, hundreds and hundreds of years ago.
Yeah,
fleas given the Black Death and then unleashed on people's pets as depopulation. There is evidence that supports that. Whoever these custodial masters are, the people who seeded the bloodlines of power that are in the power structure of the elite today, and then made them believe that through technology and through running this system this way, they could become gods as well, deceiving them.
Yes,
that's essentially what we have here. It's a whole thing based on deceit. But yeah, I mean, these guys have been running this program for the longest time, and when you start to see, he gets into the connections of the bloodlines and how they fled to Scotland, and he gets into the Bruce bloodlines and all that stuff. I mean, it's fascinating stuff, and because you really see how it connects, because of course Phyllis Schlafly's in the Bruce bloodline. You see how that whole end of the bloodline connects in with the custodial masters. It's just fascinating stuff that really ties the bow on top of the CMP stuff and the Jesuit stuff up to this point, Lee.
Well, sure. It's it always fascinated me, because I heard stories about the plagues and the Black Death and all this stuff, and I never understood, well, how did this plague all of a sudden just come out of nowhere, kill all these people? And then you see stories, even... I mean, of course, we had the Ten Commandments on ABC just recently, and of course, if you understand the story of Moses and the Exodus and all of that, prior to the Pharaoh letting the Hebrews leave and end their bondage of slavery, Moses and his God, they basically, what the Pharaoh did is he said that each firstborn Hebrew needs to die, and what essentially happened was that had the effect of this Black Death coming from the sky of all places, and literally in the film, if you watch the Ten Commandments film, you see this Black Death that comes out of the sky and then starts killing all these Egyptian firstborns. So. I mean, I don't know exactly what happened in the past. I wasn't there.
Well, yeah, and there's a part too where he's going up on Mount Sinai, and there's smoke and lights, and there's a friggin' craft up there.
Yeah, it looks like there's a friggin' spaceship that landed there, and then he gets up there, and there's this glowing light, and it's talking to him.
Hello. I mean, Mike. I mean, that's the whole thing. Is that they've perpetuated these myths. They've got everybody believing these myths, or on the other hand, not believing these myths and being atheists, which is just as bad as being one of these blind followers of this stuff. But my God, man, if you really have the context and you really start to understand what's been kept from us, it really all is right there. They've even put it in these movies for decades.
Yeah, well, what's interesting, I think the person responsible for the Ten Commandments film, I believe his name was Cecil B. DeMille.
Cecil B. DeMille, yeah.
Yeah. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't been able to confirm this, but wasn't he a member of a secret society? Wasn't he a Freemason? I don't know for sure.
If I remember correctly, he was. Yeah, he was.
He was. Okay. Yes. All right. Because he was involved in a lot of these big Hollywood hits, and the Ten Commandments, I think, was one of his last films before he passed away. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting that that he would include those elements into the film. And man, I mean, it makes you think, doesn't it? I mean, at least it does for me.
Grand Lodge of British Columbia and Yukon. Cecil B. DeMille was initiated Prince of Orange Lodge, number 16, New York.
Well, there you go. Well, I guess that's why he included those different facets in the Ten Commandments, probably because he wanted to let his fellow members of the Brotherhood know, hey, look what I put in the film. Haha.
Oh, absolutely. I think that I want to go back and watch it. It's been a few years. I mean, I remember last time I watched the Ten Commandments, I thought the same thing. I was just picking out all of the little things in it. But yeah, it makes total sense. My goodness, that would probably make Cecil B. DeMille probably one of the first guys who was really incorporating that stuff into film that far back and putting little codes and little things for the initiated to catch on to. There's probably a lot more than that we haven't even caught yet, Lee.
Yeah, and it's a long film.
It's like 5 hours. God.
It's I forget how long it is, but it's a very long film. It takes a while to get through, but it's a very. I got to tell you what. I mean, I think the films that they came out with in the 1950s and in that era, it seems as if the story writing was a lot better, the acting was a lot better, the dialogue was a lot better. I really believe that a lot of the dialogue and a lot of the script writing has been completely dumbed down for modern day audiences compared to the type of stuff that they were putting out back in the 1950s. And I really encourage everybody who hasn't seen the Ten Commandments film that came out in the 1950s to definitely take a look at it. And also, I think he did an earlier film on the Ten Commandments back in the 1920s, which I'm not sure if it was a black and white silent film or not, but yeah, I believe he was also involved with that. So very interesting stuff, no doubt.
Yeah, his was a remake, actually.
There you go. Okay.
Of the original, yeah.
So it was a remake. All right. So he didn't do the original one. I wasn't sure. But there was a Ten Commandments film that came out in the 1920s.
No, he did both. Yeah, the what I was saying is that the 1956 version was a remake of his original 1923 version, and it was a much huger hit because he I guess I guess we could suspect that maybe what happened is when he put out his first version in 1923 and then the last version that came out in 1956, probably somewhere between that time he was initiated and gone through the different degrees, and I guess probably he wanted to remake it after he had gone through the initiation of the Freemasons to put little things in there that he didn't know about the first time around.
Well, what's really funny is that between the 1923 film and the 1956 film, you have a total of 33 years between them. That's I don't know if that's a coincidence or not, but that's pretty messed up, don't you think?
Walk away, nothing to see here, no connection, no. I mean, anything involved with numbers with these guys, man, you just can't ignore.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably our joke.
Yeah, because it's all based on that. I mean, it's all based on the knowledge of sacred mathematics and anagrams and coded messages. It's a whole new language, and it's a language most people don't get an opportunity to learn. And but it's all out there. I mean, at this point, we can learn these things without having to go and initiate ourselves into the. I can't even say it on your network, but I heard it on this. There's a group out there that does songs about true stuff. They're called the Lost Children of Babylon, and one of their songs is the fraternal order of faggots. I'll just say it, fraternal order of faggots. That was a line in one of the songs, and I just thought that's a great explanation of what they are. That's really what these guys are. No question. I mean, and as you mentioned earlier with the Jesuit stuff, I mean, now, if there was a group of Arabs that had to pay, how many $1 trillion did the Jesuits had to pay, Lee? What was that number again?
Oh, you're not talking about the
butt touching Jesuits that had to pay money.
Up in the Northwest, the story we were talking about before. Oh, it was $166 million.
$166 million. I mean, if a bunch of Arabs had to pay $166 million for being butt touchers, it would be front page news. It would be on Fox. It would be everywhere. But again, what these guys do behind the scenes and what they put out to the public are two different things. And this is exactly how they perpetuated this phony system. And while I got you up here, I got to ask you, Lee. I didn't get to get your take on this. I wanted to ask you a question, but
sure, yeah.
What'd you think about Peter Joseph from Zeitgeist taking the money and running? We called that one, huh?
Oh, you know what? I did see that. I haven't had the chance to comment on that, but oh my God! First of all, man, I just have
Calm
to
down,
catch my
calm
breath
yourself
and
down. Yeah.
calm down. Try not to go completely off the deep end here. But look, I mean, and we've seen this with other people. We saw it with the loose change cast of characters. Okay, it's funny how you see these films from these filmmakers that come absolutely out of nowhere, and they get millions and millions of views, and then all of a sudden you see them on Coast to Coast, and then after 3 or 4 years of doing that, they just disappear. And
yeah, Loose Change and Zeitgeist were the two biggest movies to ever come on the scene, and they were also the two biggest ops, in my opinion.
there's no question. I think that's 100% provable at this point in time. I think with Zeitgeist, there's absolutely no question about that because, again, how can a film that comes completely out of nowhere get all this attention? It doesn't work that way unless you are working for the establishment itself. And plus, the whole concept of the Zeitgeist film, which, I mean, there's a lot of good information in the film, don't get me wrong, but that's where...
A lot of bad info, too.
Right. There's some bad information in there, especially with all the religious stuff, because they say 100% that there's no question that Jesus Christ did not exist. You can't prove that. How can somebody that was born 2,000 years after this man was said to be walking the earth, allegedly or supposedly, you can't say that. You can't make that statement in pure absolute terms. And so they did that intentionally to get people fighting over the premise that was put forward in that film. So I think it was clearly a massive operation. Plus, the amount of money that was poured into those other two films that he did, clearly, you don't get that funding.
And they were crap.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, talking about the Venus Project?
Yeah.
What the hell is that? The Lucifer Project? Okay.
Oh,
yeah, right,
God.
whatever, buddy. Yeah, so
I literally watched those videos just with an open mind, hoping there might be something good in them, and they were utter crap.
Well... Let's just say this. That guy, Peter Joseph, I think he's proven 100% that he was an operative, and you shouldn't trust anything that guy does, although I doubt we'll probably see anything from him in the future.
Oh, no. I mean, they made millions off of the first Zeitgeist, and not only did they make millions, but they also used this phony construct that, you know, Christianity is all sun worship, and that's it. And a lot of people believe that. They don't go any farther, and they don't understand there's much more to the story than the whole sun worship thing. They don't get into the origins of monotheistic religions, where that came from, how that's been perpetuated today, how that splintered off, and how the Vatican formed and Vatican II formed, and then the Council of Nicaea, and then all of these religions being, you know, scooped up and gobbled up and taken and bastardized and turned into this greater power structure. They leave all of that stuff out. They give people part of the story while some of the stuff is real. And then, as you said, what do? Well, you get the Christian patriots over here on this side arguing, and then the atheist patriots over here arguing. It's just a divide and conquer op. And I think that single-handedly that's what that was. And I never bought into that stuff from day one, even before I had a radio show. You know, I think that was actually one of the reasons why I splintered off with the 9/11 group that I was in, because, you know, they were all into that. And I was trying to tell them, look, this is another operation. This is another larger part of it. They're not giving you the whole thing here. And that was really that movie was really what inspired me to want to do a radio show. I hadn't ever really wanted to do a radio show up to that point. And then when I started hearing all this just sheer nonsense crap that was coming out about secret societies and about, you know, religion and all this stuff out of Zeitgeist, at that point I was like, look, I got to go set the record straight, you know.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of disinfo that was put in there to misguide people into directions that they wanted them to go towards. So you get, and that's why you had Alex Jones bring on Peter Joseph for that interview. Okay, so you got the yep. New Agers over here that believe in the Zeitgeist movement against all the JBS 9/11 Truth Patriots, whatever. And then, we're going to have a big fight over... That
broadcast single-handedly is one of the cleanest and clearest examples of a divide and conquer op probably ever.
That's right. Oh, there's no question about it, because clearly you have two operatives that are going back and forth arguing over the religious connotation that was presented in the Zeitgeist movie. And they're going back and forth on a number of different things. And, Yeah, clearly it was meant to put people in one camp or the other camp and get people to fight over something that really in the end doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot. I mean, basically they just want people in one camp or the other camp, both of which are controlled.
Right. And again, Bramley talked about that in the Gods of Eden about how long that's been going on, how they did that, going back to the original feudalist societies and stuff. I mean, they talked about how that has been a favorite tool of the elite and of the custodial master since time immemorial. And that was another one of those tidbits of information that went, my God, see, this is who Jones and these guys are working for. These guys who just happen to be connected to the Jesuit order and all religions and all secret societies and the extraterrestrials and all this stuff. You're considering to tell me that this just happens to be the same group who have used that program over and over and over and over again through the centuries? I mean, that's another one of those deal sealers, man.
It's all a big joke. I mean, I tell you what, when we start looking at all these religious hierarchies, and here's another, I'm not sure if you've looked into these characters, but I was looking at, I was doing some research for my film, looking at all the people who are heads of the CIA. And man, of course, there's a laundry list of Roman Catholics and Knights of Malta members, of course. But there were a couple people who are members of this Christian organization called the Christian Scientists. They're responsible for the Christian Science Monitor. And then I look up the logo of the friggin' Christian Scientists, and it's that same friggin' logo that Tim LaHaye put on his Power of the Cross book, which is a Freemasonic symbol with the cross and the crown. I was like, you got to be kidding me. So, I mean, all this stuff is tied in together. Plus, also in Bramley's book, and it was funny because I was researching this before, and I know you mentioned this briefly about the Rosicrucians, but Luther, the head of the Protestant Reformation, and he gets into how he was tied in with the Rosicrucians and the Illuminati, which is absolutely true when you look at the Lutheran seal, which is a rose and cross. I mean, all these people, they're all tied in together, and it's one sick joke.
Absolutely, man, and it is all pervasive. It's all there. It's all the way across the board. Somebody in my chat room was asking, and I'll let you knock this one out of the park. How is Jones connected to the Jesuit order? I still can't find an answer to this. You want to go off on this?
You can't find an answer to that? Well, just look at Charlie Sheen. I mean, his stage name.
That's one example.
His stage name is based off of the Archbishop priest Fulton J. Sheen, who originally, his father Martin Sheen got it originally from Fulton J. Sheen, this televangelist. There you have the televangelist connection again. Yep. Back in the 1950s. So Martin Sheen got his name from that priest, and of course Charlie Sheen got the name from the priest as well. So, and
if I'm not mistaken, that guy was preaching stuff about the New World Order and all kinds of stuff, right?
I'm not exactly sure. I haven't looked too deeply into the information he put out, but
there's video of him, dude, and he's talking stuff. He sounds like Alex Jones.
It wouldn't surprise me. Well, there's another character. What's his name? Charles Coughlin, I think it was.
Maybe it was that guy I was thinking of.
Okay, yeah, maybe it's that guy. But he did a radio show in the 1930s, and there have been a lot of comparisons to the type of broadcast that he did with the type of stuff that Alex Jones puts out. So I'm not sure if it was one of those. If it was that guy or the other person, but
he's got connections to the Jesuit order 7 ways to Sunday. I mean, my God, he has admitted connections to the Jesuit order through the John Birch Society. All the heads of the John Birch Society have been Jesuit trained, going back all the way through the history of that. His father and his uncle were John Birch Society. They're what got him into this. At the beginning of his first film, America Destroyed by Design, he plugs 3 or 4 different John Birch Society publications at the beginning of that. And also his connections with Hutton Gibson, former Jesuit priest, father of Mel Gibson. That whole connection, the tie-in there. Then you have the rest of the connections all the way across the board with the Catholics, with, of course, Pat Buchanan, who's a Jesuit, who we have on in the first Secret Rites, of Jesuit. The Jesuits taught Pat Buchanan how to think. Who happened to work on Pat Buchanan's Jesuit presidential campaign in 1996? None other than Alex Jones.
That's right.
So the connection, I mean, if you can't find the connections to the Jesuits, Alex Jones, at this point, you're just not looking hard enough.
Yeah, and I'm actually looking at your chat room right now, and the person is looking for a link. Well, I mean, we can't spoon feed this stuff to you. You can look up these things for yourself. It's very easy. I mean, there's countless videos of Jones interviewing the head of the John Birch Society, and there's actually a quote on his own website on Infowars.com that was posted by Bob Dacey, who's a John Birch Society member, that talked about how John McManus looked forward to continuing the relationship that him and Jones had. And of course, McManus was educated at the College of Holy Cross, which is a Jesuit-based institution up here in Massachusetts. So there's a lot of connections. But I mean, just take a look at the laundry list of characters that he has on his show. They're all tied in with all these religious institutions, the Council for National Policy, the John Birch Society. The list goes on and on. So I think that's a good starting point to really look at the connections between Jones and the Jesuit order and some of these other nefarious organizations.
Absolutely. I just, I didn't really have anything else to add. There's a lot of connections there too. But the big one is, of course, to me, with the whole idea of the John Birch Society really being created after the attempted rise of the League of Nations, when people started becoming aware of this idea of a global government and needing a stopgap there to keep people from getting too close to finding out what the whole master plan is. I mean, it's now, because of the internet, we've been able to have access to finding all these ancient books and these books that have been written and stuff through the years, and even books in the modern day over the past 100 years where they openly admit to this. Carol Quigley and some of these other books that have been written and have come out. A lot of this is where they're just detailing the plan right there for you. But they had to have something that was going to be in the way to keep people from finding out who it was. So that's really why it's vital to point out the connections to Jones and the John Birch Society and the Jesuit order and his connection to the Sheens and the Gibsons and all that stuff, because it does make the case for what we already know about these people as being gatekeepers going back for centuries, Lee.
Oh, sure, absolutely. And just a few more points on the John Birch Society that I wanted to bring up real quick. And first of all, the John Birch Society is named after John Birch, and there's actually a 1961 Life magazine article, you could find this, on the John Birch Society, and it gets into the origins of the group and who John Birch was. And he was an OSS officer. The OSS was started up by Wild Bill Donovan, who was knighted by the Pope, for God's sakes. And of course, Bill Donovan played a role in the CIA and the formation of that with the Dulles brothers and those characters. But if you take a look at that Life magazine article, you'll see that John Birch's funeral was attended by a Jesuit priest. Okay, and on top of that, but the John Birch Society basically took up the reins after Joseph McCarthy died for all this anti-communist rhetoric that we saw throughout the United States during the Cold War. Well, if you take a look at Joseph McCarthy, he was educated at the Jesuit-run school Marquette, and he was buddies with this Jesuit scholar by the name of Edmund Walsh, and there's actually a school named for him at Georgetown University, which, again, is a Jesuit-based school. So, I mean, there's all sorts of friggin' Jesuit connections here. Do you think all this is a coincidence? I mean, if you believe all this is a coincidence, then I don't know what to tell you.
It's also a coincidence that every time Ron Paul goes and speaks at a university, it's either Loyola or Columbia.
Yeah, or doesn't he speak at Georgetown also?
Georgetown, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, there too.
So Loyola and Georgetown, which are Loyola, for Ignatius of Loyola, that's the guy who started the friggin' Jesuits. That's what the school's named after. I mean, come on, people, wake up here. I mean, this is not very difficult to figure out. This is real information. This is stuff you can easily look up. I mean,
but these brainwashed truthers trying to act like that stuff, that those points don't matter, Lee. They try to act like that information is just irrelevant. I can't understand how somebody can be. It's programming. It's mind control. It's a cult mentality. Only a cult mentality can make someone take information that's right in front of their face and is true and just brush it off like it doesn't exist. That is a brainwashed cult mentality, period, end of story.
It's unbelievable. I just don't understand how you can possibly dismiss an organization that's been around for over 400 years as not being relevant. This organization didn't last for 400 years because they were ineffective at what they were doing. No, they're very effective at what they're doing, and that's why they've been around for that amount of time. Plus, you see how these intelligence organizations and these secret societies, a lot of them, they've been based off of the Jesuits. The Rhodes-Milner Roundtable was based off of the Jesuits. The Himmler's SS was based off of the Jesuits. I mean, these are some very damning connections here. So you got to look into these groups, and you have to look into this information beyond what is being spoon-fed to you by these characters that are tied to the JBS and these phony truthers and patriots. I mean, it's making me sick, man. I mean, I feel like a broken record talking about this stuff, but it just seems as if people just don't get it.
Yeah, and either they don't get it or in some cases they just flat don't want to anymore. I think a lot of people are just, it is willful ignorance, and a lot of people engage in that, and it's just as dangerous as not knowing about information, Lee. But can we go ahead and initiate a break at this point in the show?
Yes, I was about to suggest that because I'm about gassed right now, and I'm like, my face is about to turn purple because I'm just getting so upset with all this crazy stuff that we're talking about. It's just frustrating, man. I mean, that's all there is to it. So, yeah, I think for my health, we should definitely take a quick break. So, I think what we'll do is we'll take a quick, 6 or 7 minute break. We'll come back at roughly around the half-hour mark. We have a half an hour left, and we'll finish the broadcast. But, let's play some tunes, and we will come back. Again, I'm joined here by my guest, Josh Reeves. You can check out his radio show and his documentary films on the website theglobalreality.com. So check that out. Lots of good stuff there. And we'll be right back after we take. Yeah, we're back. I'm joined here by my guest, Josh Reeves. Theglobalreality.com is the website, and I guess we're going to try to wrap up the broadcast here in the final half hour. And Josh, during the break, you were mentioning to me that you were looking at some information pertaining to the Japanese nuclear disaster and some correlations with UFO activity and, of course, this whole incident. And I did see this in the news. I didn't really think much of it, but apparently there's some goings-on with the whaling industry over there as it pertains to this whole nuclear accident. So I was hoping you could just tell the audience some of the things they were telling me about what you uncovered about these various connections to the Japanese nuclear disaster.
Yeah, it's not really anything I uncovered. I just was looking at some different things and drawing some different conclusions from things I'd heard. There just seems to be something a lot more sinister going on with this. Of course, people have speculated that that Japan was taken down in some sort of retaliation for providing nuclear material to Iran, and they had the Stuxnet virus launched on them in the middle of this earthquake and a hurricane thing going on, and I don't know if that's true or it's not. Very well could be, but it seemed to be over Japan, over the Fukushima facility right before it went meltdown. There were all these UFO sightings around that, and apparently there was the same thing that happened around Chernobyl when that disaster went down. And there was some. I remember last year, one of those kooks or one of those people that were coming on air every few months and saying that aliens were going to make themselves apparent to us, and that they were, they were seen. There was other reports that came out in the news last year. I know I covered on my show, and you did as well, about these things messing with our nuclear facilities and things of that nature. I just thought it was odd that in the middle of this, and we've heard of years of connections between extraterrestrials and whales and extraterrestrials communicating, and then of course in Star Trek being full of all the programming that it's been full of through the years and little hints and things. We had one of the Star Trek films where that was the whole premise of it, where the whales had been killed off, and this alien craft gets near Earth and starts basically destroying everything on Earth because it can't communicate with these whales. And so in the middle of all of this Fukushima thing's going down and Japan's in complete chaos, they find the foresight to get their stuff together long enough to announce that they're going to be no longer doing any whaling, which has been one of the biggest, most contentious issues with the world's on the world stage with Japan and the rest of the world, is the whaling. So I found that when I heard that, I went, you know what? Maybe there is something to the whole extraterrestrial thing and the UFO thing over Fukushima. At that point, I just had, I hadn't really thought much about it. Kind of maybe thought, oh, well, they say that about everything or whatever. And I didn't really look much into it or think about it. But it just seemed like it was one of those red flags, Lee, where, okay, in the middle, your government is completely in shambles. Your country's in shambles in the middle of this. And with everything going on, your most important decision is to come out and say, we're going to end Japanese whaling. I mean, it makes me feel like it was done under duress. Like somebody basically, gave them information and said, look, we did this. If you don't stop doing this, we'll do it again. And I just don't see governments that have weather warfare technology. I just don't see it in the elites. It doesn't make sense to me because unless there is some larger ramification for it, I don't know. I guess what it boils down to is It could be one of two things. It could be that, this is extraterrestrials trying to send a message, or it could be the leader doing this because they know these whales serve some function that, again, they're not telling us about. It's some sort of hidden secret knowledge. So it could be either one of those things. But what I'm seeing here is that I think we've seen a massive. We talked about this last time on the show. I came on this massive disinfo operation where they've got some people believing that we need to stock up on radiation pills and radiation's going to hit us. And then we got other people saying, oh, no, there's nothing to worry about. And again, you get people on this side or that side. And then when people get split into a side, they forget the larger issue. And the larger issue here is that this has sinister implications for the entire planet. We should all be concerned with it. And we shouldn't just turn a blind eye to it and move on to whatever the next big story in the news cycle is. This should be something we should be focusing on. But it seems to me that there's just a lot of indicators that a massive cover-up is going on concerning the real implications of this whole situation in Japan, Lee.
Well, sure. It kind of reminds me of what happened with the BP oil disaster. And
same thing, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's stories that, and they commonly reported just a little while ago that there's these people, as I predicted, and look, it didn't take a genius to figure it out, but they're spraying all these chemicals in the air with the Corexit garbage, and now you got all these people that are sick and having respiratory problems. Well, no kidding. I mean, but that's not talked about. That's not even anywhere near the news cycle. They just briefly mentioned, 1 year anniversary of the Gulf oil disaster and ho-hum, and then they move on to something else. And what's interesting with the whole Japanese nuclear disaster, and this didn't take a genius to figure out either, but after that event went down, you had a huge media blitz for a few weeks, and then it just disappeared. We're going to talk about the royal wedding. The royal wedding's coming up. We're going to spend time talking about that. So the media cycle is so fickle. But I do tell you what, that is some interesting information about the Japanese nuclear disaster, and the correlation to Star Trek is particularly curious because I remember seeing that film when I was like 8 or 9 years old. I actually saw it in the theaters. I think it was the fourth Star Trek film, Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home.
Yeah, The Voyage Home, yeah.
Yeah, where they time travel, they fly around the sun, they come back to 1980s planet Earth, and Spock gives some guy the Vulcan, the Vulcan death grip on some guy with a boombox or something. Just ridiculous stuff. But yeah, they had to bring back those humpback whales. And they had time travel back to the 23rd century or wherever it was.
Because we killed them all off from whaling and stuff. They even said that in the movie.
Yeah, and they made some... I remember Spock, when they finally got to the 1980s version of Earth, they said, oh, well, judging from the pollution levels, we've arrived in 20th century America. It's like, all right, okay, Spock.
Yeah, he did say that. He said, judging by the pollution levels, we've entered 20th century. Yeah, and they're standing there in the line, and he says... he's asking me, he's like, well, what happened to the whales? And he says, well, we hunted them, we ended up hunting them to extinction. And Spock says, Captain, hunting a species to its extinction is not logical. And no crap, Sherlock. I mean, my goodness. Obviously not, so it just there was all sorts of little references in there. Yeah, they sort of had the whole environmental slant towards that because, I know that Leonard Nimoy, who actually directed that movie, was at that time, very oddly enough, leaning towards a lot of environmental stuff. And it makes me wonder if Leonard Nimoy was initiated into secret societal orders and given secret information, because back in the 70s he did the TV show In Search Of. And there's a particular show on an episode of In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy doing the narration for it, where it's all about how, in the year 2010, we're going to have an ice age, and it was all this stuff about ice age things. And then he turns around in the 80s and he starts becoming very environmentally conscious. There's actually an interview where he talks about the origins of the Spock split-fingered hand gesture, and he talks about how he, because he was Jewish, and he had to go to this ritual where they brought in these ancient Hebrew priests, like the Kabbalists, that went back to the origins of Hebrew. And the origins of Judaism. And the women had to sit, his sister and mom had to sit in the top, and only the men were allowed to be down. And they had to put their heads down. They weren't allowed to look at the priests as the priests went around. These ancient priests went around and did their thing and blessed everybody in the room. And he said, being a kid at the time, the parent would tell him not to look at something. So he peeked And when he peaked, and this is what is was interesting to me, Lee, and I can't really figure out the origins of this to this day, but maybe we'll put it out there and somebody will crack it. But Leonard Nimoy said that when he peaked, he saw these priests in robes, and they were all walking around the crowd, and they were doing what is now we know as the Vulcan Spock, live long and prosper hand sign. And They were doing that with their hands split, and they were doing it, putting it all over the tops of people's heads and doing it like they were casting a spell or something of some sort. So that's a highly interesting piece of thing, and he just incorporated that, and it is some sort of magical. We know that these hand signs do have power, either to manipulate and control the mind, or if they're used in the fashion of a secret handshake and a grip. What these grips do is when they initiate a grip, it creates basically an energy line, a connection, and they're able to actually communicate with each other using only their minds by using these different magical grips. And I actually had a Freemason put one on me one time at this Masonic Cathedral my sister and I had visited up in Guthrie, Oklahoma, and I was telling him about how I had surgery when I was a kid, and the Scottish Rites did it because I was sponsored there from my dad's friend that was a Freemason, and they worked on my foot and all this. And the guy, I kept talking on the whole tour. I was just naming stuff off, what it was, and he was like, "You're not a Freemason?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "Well, you ought to be." And so at the end of the thing, we're saying goodbye and everything, and he's like, "Thanks for showing us around." And he shook my hand, and when he shook my hand, dude, he grabbed my hand and he put this grip on me, and it like locked with my hand. And he looked me dead in the eye, and I kid you not, with his mind, he said to me, "Join us."
Yeah, that's messed up, man. I tell you what, there's some stuff that's out there that it's really hard to explain, but
I had a cold chill, man. I had a cold chill. I mean, that was one of those moments when you experience something for yourself, when you realize, oh my God.
Exactly.
It's not a joke, man. It's real.
It's absolutely real. It. Yeah, and let me just tell you this. I don't know if you've been listening to some of my shows I did, but man, this one guy called into my show just a short period of time ago. Some guy from Maine, and apparently he was a guest on Coast to Coast AM. And I don't know, man. I got the weirdest friggin' vibe from this guy. I felt like he was trying to psychically attack me or something. It was very bizarre. He said that he was in contact with aliens, all this weird stuff. And man, I mean, I got the same feeling that I got when I was reading from Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma over the air. That was that show where I could not continue.
What day did this happen last week?
I'll have to look up the show. I can find it for you, but
was it last week or the week before?
I can't remember. It was the past couple of weeks, but I'll have to look it up. But basically, man, I mean, it was the weirdest friggin' feeling, and it was the same type of feeling I got, not to the same extent, but almost to the same extent that I got when I was reading the Morals and Dogma book. It was just really weird. I felt like he was trying to do something to my aura, to my energy, and I didn't like it. It was really bizarre.
Well, check your archives to see if it was somewhere around the April 14th or 15th show, because right around that time, too, I had the same thing happen to me, Lee, on air. I don't know if you heard that broadcast that I did, but I think it was the 13th or 14th, maybe the 15th. I can't remember one of the broadcasts, but I was sitting there reading William Bramley in the middle of it. My throat started feeling like it was closing up on me in the middle of the show, and I felt like I couldn't catch my breath, and I felt like I felt like I was being psychically attacked. Well, I have a bunch of crystals on my little desk here that have energy. So I grabbed this big quartz crystal that I have, and I started gripping it, and I could feel the crystal was literally getting like hot in my hand, because whatever was attacking me was transferring itself to this crystal that I was holding on to. It was just getting hot. It's firing. I said it on air. I said, guys, I feel like I'm getting psychically attacked by something right here while I'm on air. It'd be interesting to see if that was somewhere around the time I felt that. I think they're sending out these, and one of my listeners had actually a couple of weeks ago sent me a message and said that he was apparently this person was a very attuned sort of spiritual person. And this person said that they felt that I was going to be psychically attacked soon. And like within 2 weeks after saying that, getting that email, I felt like I was, and there was, I had some friends here who had that same sort of similar thing happen to them, where they were under psychic attack and energy attack. Weird stuff went on that week. I think that they are, it's very important to keep yourself very, to have things for protection and stuff like that around you for energy, because these guys are dirty tricksters, and they will use these, this magic, this corrupted teaching. And that's what it is. It's all magic is. It's a corrupted teaching. It's being used for magic, could be used for, probably for the unenslavement and the betterment of mankind, but they're using it for this kind of stuff, psychic attack, and for their own personal gain and for negative control purposes. I think that now that you and I have been, I don't think more than anybody else out there have become really the only threats to exposing a big part of the grand agenda and the grand plan. And we're heavy on their radars, and they can't, if they kill us or anything like that or mess with us, dude, it's going to blow up in their faces. It'll just blow up overnight, and everything we've ever said will be vilified. So they can't do that. But I think they have to resort to doing this psychic attack stuff, and trying to affect our mentalities or the mentalities of people around us and trying to affect us that way. That way they have plausible deniability. Same way they use weather warfare and stuff now. That's why they use that, because they can affect and still do things that will affect and help along the agenda for global government. But they have plausible deniability. There's nothing they can trace it back to. Well, the psychic attack thing, which ties into some of the stuff that was talked about during, the Philadelphia experiment and the Montauk stuff and the Montauk chair, and then that's what they do is they put people who are high level psychic and have different brain power, and they use it to transmit things. And electronic harassment is another one they do. They use electronic devices to put stuff in people's heads. I mean, it's all real. And I think at this stage in the game, we'd be naive to think that we haven't had some of this stuff directed at us, Lee, because of some of the information that we've brought out and discussed on our shows.
No, I think it's 100%. I 100% agree with you. I mean, just based upon my experiences. I mean, if you told me 3 or 4 years ago that, oh yeah, somebody would be psychically attacking me or something, I'd be like, yeah, whatever. But no, I mean, literally, there's no question that this stuff is actually transpiring, because I just experienced these things for myself. And Josh, I don't have nearly as much experience in the esoteric realms and in the psychic realm as I'm sure you do. I mean, you're much more well versed in a lot of these areas than I am. But man, I mean, you can't really explain it until you experience it. I don't know if that's really a good way to describe it to the audience.
Oh, it is.
But I mean, that literally, there's no way I can really describe how I felt when these things were happening to me. It's just, you have this really bizarre, strange feeling that comes over you that you just can't explain unless it's happening to you.
That's like, what does dying feel like? Well, you can't explain really what dying feels like, because if you could explain it, you wouldn't be here anymore. You'd be dead.
Right.
So, exactly. You know what I mean? It's kind of that same sort of thing where when you feel you're being psychically attacked and your energy attacked, it's not something the best way that I can describe it is you can literally feel, or at least I think some people can and some people can't. I think the people who are ignorant to the wider spectrum of what's going on probably don't even notice when it happens. But those of us who learn about this information, once you learn about it, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because once you learn about it and you're aware of it and you realize that it exists, then you also are able to tell where maybe you wouldn't before when you weren't aware of it, if you're being affected by it or not. And I think that that's where a lot of us are at. We are a lot more susceptible to negative energy and bad vibrations and things that are being used for harmful purposes, because we're aware of the larger spectrum of everything that exists around us. People who don't know it's there, people have some weird thing happen to them. Their mother dies while choking on an apple, and then the day of her funeral, a guy goes outside and an apple tree is crashed on his car. Those are the kind of things where some people would just say, "Oh, that's weird. That's just a strange thing." Well, no, it's that sort of underlying thing that's working there. And so a lot of people aren't aware of that. And once you and I and then the rest of us out there become aware of this, then we notice it when it's being done to us. And I think that it's very much is real. And I think that the main thing that we can do is just deflect that back away from ourselves by not giving into the fear and not giving into because that's what they want. They're hoping, best case scenario, they'll just be able to scare the you-know-what out of us, and we'll go back and recant everything we've ever said about this stuff. That's one of their biggest things that they love to do, is they just scare you into not talking about whatever it is anymore. And again, I think they've directed some of that stuff at us. People have come to me from time to time, different researchers and people who've been radio hosts. People have come to me from time to time and said things like, that they had the Jesus scared out of them by some spiritual experience. And then, they don't want to talk about this stuff anymore. It happens to people all the time. There's people who, I've known people who have researched stuff for years and years and years, and then they just stop researching and don't look at this information anymore because they feel that after understanding and realizing it's there, they just want to go on about their business and just, forget about it. And I think all this is designed to do that. They want us to be scared of this information. They want us to be scared of the implications. As long as they can keep us in fear, they can keep us in fear of ever finding the truth. And you can only find the truth if you're going at it with no fear and with no control and with no pre-existing programming holding you back. And that's the biggest thing that holds people back and holds back their knowledge base and how much they can learn and understand. It's these constructs and these programs that are built there that are holding them back, because they're holding back their belief of what they believe is possible based on what they've been programmed with and told by starting at a young age with adults and everything else their whole life. I knew at, I don't know, 5 or 6, man. I mean, I can remember not being a kid and knowing that every time I would ask an adult an honest question, I would get a BS answer from them. I just knew it. I just knew that there was, and now I look back on that and I think, the adults probably were just as clueless as anybody was that I was asking those questions to now. But even at a young age, I could just tell that things were beyond what we were being told they were.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because when you're younger and you're talking to adults, a lot of adults, they like to give you a fantasy version of reality. That's why you got things like the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. And I'm not sure if that's really a healthy way to approach it, because basically you're lying to your children. You're saying, okay, well, there's an Easter Bunny, there's Santa Claus, and look, I understand. Okay, kids, all right, fine, I can understand where you're coming from, but in the same respect, I mean, kids are a lot more smarter than adults give them credit for. Because I remember even when I was younger, like the same age as you were, that I had an intuition. I didn't like it when adults got down and like talked to me like I was some baby, like I was stupid. Because I had intellect. I knew what was going on, and I felt like I had a bunch of people that were treating me like I wasn't on the same level as they were, and that always upset me as a young child, because I knew what they were talking about. I wasn't stupid, and adults seem to have this preconceived notion that children are that way. So whenever I interact with children, I talk to them like they're adults. I don't talk to them like, "Oh, how you doing, little Johnny?" I don't talk to them like that, because I think that's insulting our human being, and I don't want to be a part of that.
Yeah, that's the whole big thing is kids have great BS detectors at the early age like that. And that's what I was mentioning earlier is with the programming and television and society and the culture and everything. That's what all that stuff is designed to breed out of us. Is they want to take and strip all those elements away from us, because then we have less of an opportunity to be able to see through the lies they try to sell us on TV with politicians and lawmakers and everything else. So it starts at an early age and it continues. The great thing is, Lee, you and I are here and we're on the radio right now and every night, and we're talking about this stuff. That's still a whole damn sight better than the past, because some of these topics we've talked about here on the show tonight, even when you and I started on radio, were considered taboo. And now it's not taboo. We've just done 3 hours talking about this stuff, and that's a good thing. Because now it's out there and it can't be restricted from the conversation anymore. You and I put this on the permanent record here tonight, and it can't be ignored. None of this information anymore. It's out there. The genie's out of the bottle. And now the only thing it can do is just continue to perpetuate itself and get bigger and bigger. Because, again, in the past, a lot of this stuff would not have been able to be talked about over the airwaves. So I think that you and I are in a very, very lucky position that we get to have our platforms to talk about the things that we do, Lee.
Well, certainly. And the fact of the matter is that this show gets thousands of downloads on the podcast. It gets put out there. So there are people listening to this. And what I hope will happen is that people will start to, it'll be like one of those things where the information starts spreading, kind of like a viral marketing campaign where, okay, well, one person listens to this information, starts looking into it, say, hey, there's something here. And then they start talking about it. And that's the only way we'll be able to ever get this information out to more and more people is if that happens. It's going to take more than just me and you just talking about this on a night-to-night basis. We need more people out there putting out this information, maybe finding out stuff on their own that either one of us haven't come across or our researchers haven't come across. And, I hope to, at least in the future, that we can keep pushing the envelope with this stuff. I think it's very important that we do it. But, man, I tell you what, we're just out of time. I mean, these 3 hours just went flying by.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable. So, we could probably do another 3 hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, man. Well, we've got a couple minutes left. So, Josh, you have anything you want to plug, anything you want to mention to the audience real quick before we sign off?
Oh, yeah, just the usual. People can check out my radio network and all my work at my website. It's www.theglobalreality.com. That's theglobalreality.com. They can also email me at globalrealityshow@gmail.com. I got all my movies and all my clips and everything's up there. You can buy my movies on my website as well. You can donate to our work if you want. It's all up there. And Lee, thanks for having me on tonight, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. And we'll have you up again next month, and we'll I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about. But stay on the line real quick while I finish up the broadcast. Just want to talk to you a little bit off air about some things. But thanks again for coming on. And folks, thanks for tuning in tonight. And you can check out my website at roadgovernment.com. All the stuff about what I do, news articles, everything is up there on the website. oraclebroadcasting.com. You can check out that as well. And that's all we got. We're just out of time. But thanks for tuning in. And I will be back again tomorrow with another show. So thanks for listening, and we will see you later. Take care.